Hey, it's 8:47 p.m. It is July 23rd. It is Tuesday evening, and I wanted to come on here and make this video because then I've been thinking in the last few days. Now, just to kind of give everyone a little bit more of an update of what I've been doing. I've been thinking a lot about C.B. Berganza's origins, and which led me to question, the readings that I did in the last few months on those past life readings. Okay. Now, I believe that those readings were pretty accurate, but I think that there were some things that I left kind of hanging, and they're filling in the blanks on certain information. Okay. Now, um, I had mentioned before that I do have Egyptian roots, and this is where I originally came from. And I was taken from Ethiopia and moved to England. So of course, I have some questions. Okay, now I did a pretty long video, maybe a few months ago. I think it was a few months ago. I posted it. It was just me breaking down different card spreads, getting information, and I kind of left it at that. I remember mentioning that I was getting a little overwhelmed because it was very depressing and it was just too much, right? Well, in the last few days, I figured, I'm just going to stop focusing on what I'm doing right now here in my life as Maria Gordon. Um, I had informed everybody that I had taken down my platform on Ko-fi, okay, because I felt as though I was being invaded, which led me to start, thinking about what's going on in the current life, and I started to thinking about my past life and how this all relates and ties in. So I decided to step aside. Right now I'm not focusing on that, but it reminded me of a story or a conversation that I had with my father many years ago. I used to flip through my mom's Star Me Inquirer, and of course, because I've had issues relating to mail order type stuff all my life, I would look in the back of the Star and the Inquirer, and I would find weird ads, like, of course, sea monkeys and stuff like that, But I remember seeing, ads where, you could they would ask you to submit like a song that you wrote, right? So that you can get paid. And I remember telling my dad that I was excited about turning in this song because I wanted to get paid. And I remember him like jumping down my throat. My dad was the kind of person like when discipline was like maybe about an hour long session. Like when he was telling you something, his experiences, he would go on and on and on. So I get the feeling that my dad must have tried stuff and he must have got burned, okay? But I was a kid, right? And so the idea of like writing a song and making money was interesting to me. I kept thinking, why not? So I used to write songs, not great ones, okay? But I've always played around with poetry, and basically, poetry is just like, music is just poetry set to music, right? Or tones or melodies or whatever. So he was really upset about that, and but I for whatever reason that popped in my head when I separated myself from that Ko-fi account, right? Because my father was older than me. He was experienced, and he understood that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Okay, which made me start thinking about, okay, how I had questions about C.B. Berganza's time here and his ability to support himself as an occultist. What exactly happened? And so, this is me picking up from the readings that I did before. Now, C.B. Berganza seems like throughout his entire life, he always referred to himself as an occultist. But I am doing these readings. The readings that I did today indicated to me that he worked regular jobs. Okay, like I finally got a chance to create a tarot spread that can identify occupations. Okay, and I might be showing that in this video, and I might not. This video is going to take me a few days to complete. Okay, just so you know, because I am using a combination of regular playing cards, and I'm also using a few the tarot cards that I have created. What do you call it? I created interpretations for tarot cards to identify my occupation. Okay, and I had decided to split the deck. Okay, now when you're working with tarot cards, um, there's the minor arcana and there's the major arcana. So I'm basically using just the major arcana, the 22 cards of the major arcana, and I split them and I assigned different occupations to them. Okay, I'm debating whether or not to attach the information, my interpretations on YouTube, all right, so that you can retrieve them in the description box. I'm debating whether I should or not because right now I'm not working, and because of the Kofi fiasco, as well as the Patreon one, and then that message that I remembered, the songwriting thing that my dad told me, that psychic message. I feel as though my this message is like a warning from my father. Okay, of being very careful about things that you do, online. Now, back then, people could get lured into making those sort of mistakes back in the newspapers, in magazines, even on TV. People would do things where, they would advertise for something, and then you don't actually get what they advertise for. Okay, so these things could very well be one of those, what do you call it, filters or whatever, to where like you upload your stuff and there's a possibility that it could be um, taken, not necessarily monetized by the person who takes it, but they could be stealing your ideas. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Okay, and so you have to take that into consideration. So that's my message that I received. So right now I'm not really focusing on, doing online work. And obviously I have been, kicked out of the 9 to 5 because of this same issue. Okay. So right now I'm trying to regroup. Now me and my son were talking and he was like, you should try to look for work. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know how I'm going to manage all of this, but whatever, because of the 9 to 5 issue of me being harassed out of work. But that is a story for another day. But this is a life that I have to struggle with because of the same issue. It all leads to the same issue. So anyway, I have a few message things I wanted to kind of go over. I received some intuitive messages. This video is about my Egyptian roots, right? And it's about me and my soul traveler. That would be my father, James Calvin Gordon, who was the reincarnation of King Tut. And I'm going to go over some messages that I got. Okay, the first thing is that I got an intuitive message that to cause confusion, okay, to cause race confusion, okay, the Black Egyptians were moved from Egypt to Ethiopia, okay, so I am starting to believe or suspect or theorize, okay, and like I said, this is all me coming up with hypothesis and then me trying to get confirmation, okay, some of this may not even be confirmed throughout this entire video. Some of this is going to be like a cliffhanger. Well, I might have to come back and do like a part 2, okay? But I figured that out because I kept wondering, how is it that Prince Alamehu could be in Ethiopia, but have Egyptian roots? Okay, so I'm looking at timelines and trying to figure things out, really, because the last readings I got, it just left me with more questions, right? So I got an intuitive message. That was one of the messages, that it wasn't like I was living in Egypt for many, 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 many years, right? And then I ended up popping up somewhere in Ethiopia. Okay, there's a little bit more to this story. Okay, and this is what I'm trying to uncover in this video. Okay, but that's one of the intuitive messages, and also, um, let's see. Okay, so I also got another message in my mind today. It was about CB Braganza, and it was CB never formalized. Okay, CB was offered the opportunity to clone uh, King Tut by church affiliation. Now, I had mentioned before, like my situation here, where, I cannot make money online. And I suspect that my work may have been sabotaged, either blocked or whatever. Okay. Well, ZB Braganza was able to support himself through employment. Okay. This is what I received, messages I received intuitively, and then I did some card reading to kind of confirm to see the consistency. Okay. So, but he always considered himself to be an occultist, a seer, a whatever. And I would think that his pattern was very similar to mine, like in this life. Like when I'm not working a regular 9 to 5 job, what I sit here and do is try to figure out, okay, how else can I take care of myself? At the end of the day, I'm always an occultist, okay, and I'm always going to come up with occult related ideas or whatever. So I believe that CB Braganza probably worked or tried to work and do things through the mail order, serve things, but people snagged his ideas and used it, and were able to make money off of his ideas. So this is where the message I'm getting. But somehow or another, CB Briganda did work other jobs. Okay, but he still considers himself a cultist. As I can see in the picture that he took in 1930, where he's holding up that crystal ball. I know I had got a message when I did a reading using my tarot, my cards, the major arcana cards, that he did a bunch of different kind of things. Okay, and I'm going to go into that in just a minute. But um, okay, so I started thinking about my dad. Okay, because there were certain things that just didn't add up. It didn't make sense to me. Okay, now I had did a reading, a past life reading, about me having problems with what I thought was my soulmate. Because in order for me to kind of make it, I believe I was basically kind of forced into marriage or encouraged to marry somebody. Okay, and at first I thought it was my soulmate, but then I kept thinking that doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so this Howland person is not really connected. I don't believe that this Howland person is connected to my father. Okay, so my wife at the time, okay, so I married my wife. I don't know her name. CB Berganza got married, okay? I do not know her name. I'm going to have to follow up with that at some other time. But she was not my um, my soulmate. She was just some person I ended up marrying, okay? But I did give birth to Louise. Well, I didn't, but my partner did give birth to Louise, which was my daughter, okay, in my past life, okay? So, um, but the problem was we did have problems in our marriage. It was not necessarily a bad marriage, but what caused problems is there was a lot of outside intrusion. Okay, so it was a lot of bickering. Now let me get into who I'm talking about, which is me and my soul traveler, which is James Gordon, and how I started thinking a little bit more about why this didn't make sense to me. Now this is my favorite person that ever walked the face of this earth. This is James Calvin Gordon. This is the man who was my father in my life as Maria Gordon. My father was born in 1933 and he passed away in 1996. Now, for people who got to know my father, like when I was younger, living in Lancaster, they knew a different version of him. They knew him a little bit more older, of course, and a little bit more heftier. Okay, and of course, because he was a victim of what do you call it, targeting and harassment, he basically ended up dying of a multi-infarct dementia. Okay, I believe it was brought on by the constant stress as well as the medical system helping promoting him to uh, go downward. My father, James Calvin Gordon, was the reincarnation of King Tut, which I'll go into King Tut in just a minute. My father joined the military in the 1950s, and he married my mother, Mary Gordon. Of course, Mary Gordon is not my biological mother, but she did raise me. I have come to understand, that Mary Gordon, I'm going to refer to her as my stepmother. Okay. My James Calvin Gordon, because of the issue of cloning, that would actually make James Calvin Gordon my grandson. uh, yeah, it would make him my grandson. This is so crazy. Okay, it would make him my grandson. Why? Because C.P. Berganza, um, daughter, Louise, gave birth to James Calvin Gordon. Whew, I mean, this gets so much. It really does. But you know what? Just keep hanging there, hanging there. I know that when my father left this earth, it's sad to say that he was a very despised person. Okay, I think there's a lot of pain that I experienced because of the menticide that was inflicted on my father, the bullying, the um, the disrespect that they showed him, and him being ostracized um, into the condition that he died in. And this is something that, has pained me for very many years. And I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. And I think this is one of the things that hurts me the most, okay? Because people in my family, I believe, knew, because they knew that I was a clone, and they knew that my father was being targeted because I had no idea that I was supposed to fall in line. But see, the problem is when you're a part of this program, the program is to bully a person to the point of death, to die. Literally, when you're a target, this is what their goal is to literally destroy you. So they pushed my father to the edge, and and the community that we lived in did a good job helping that along. Okay. I hope that this never happens to anyone else again, because I'm going to tell you, James Calvin Gordon was the best father that ever lived. And he, unfortunately, there was a lot of things that went on in that family that I didn't really understand until now. And I'm sure that I'm going to be finding out more stuff that might make me sad. Some of this was going to make me happy, but it's something that I feel like it's really important for me to know right now. Plus, it helps give me a little bit of distraction because I'm really not too excited about the things that are going on in my life right now. Like, I've decided to step away from Maria Gordon's life, and I just want to get some closure. And I felt like, going back to the starting point as to when this dark cloud came over our family. Okay, so let me go on to the next slide. Okay, so this morning, when I first woke up, I had the window open and I had, the sun was just like beaming straight in my eye this morning when I woke up, right? And the first thing that came to my mind was the King Tut tomb, right? Okay, now I know when I was little, I remember watching, everyone in our family watched this movie about King Tut's tomb, okay? And apparently there was a story about King Tut's tomb, being cursed, and people go into these old tombs, they end up paying some sort of consequence. Now, I watched the movie with my mother, my stepmother, and my what do you call it, adopted sister, right? So we all watched this movie, and not one person mentioned that my father was the clone of King Tut. Not one. Okay, but we watched the movie. Okay, and I remember thinking, okay, that was an interesting story, and I remember, me having an interest in Egypt and all this other stuff. Okay. Okay, so this morning, I was thinking about, how in the world did this make sense? Because I was thinking about the readings that I had did a few months before. Okay, and I do believe that my father came out of the womb of his mother. Okay, so I just assumed at the time when I did the reading that my father had a natural birth, meaning, he was produced the way through sexual intercourse. Okay, not actual cloning off of DNA, whatever. All right, so this morning I was just like really starting to think about stuff, right? I kept thinking, okay, James Gordon. I kept thinking, in my first reading, I assumed that I was always linked to my soulmate and that my wife, during the time that I was C.B. Berganza, was my soulmate, right? I mean, that's just what I assumed, right? But now I'm starting to get a clearer picture, okay? So C.B. Berganza married somebody else, okay? And so I kept thinking, okay, well then if I'm a soul traveler with my father, which I always believed, okay, then where in the world would he fit in this picture? He wasn't my wife, so who was he? Right? So then I started thinking, okay, timelines. My dad was born in 1933, and I kept thinking, okay, so I'm thinking about the King Tut excavation of his tomb, right? That happened in 1922. So let me read something really quick to you because I wrote it down. I wrote down, in 1922, the tomb of King Tut was discovered in the Valley of the Kings by excavators led by Egyptologist Howard Carter. Okay, it is believed that during the time of the discovery, it was more than 3,300 years after King Tut's death and burial. Now, I also want to say, and I do not know how to pronounce King Tut's real name, okay? It's actually Tutankhamun, I believe that's how you say it. Tutankhamun. Okay, that's how you pronounce his name, okay? And I'm really shitty at it. But anyway. All right, so basically, in 1922, they went to excavate this tomb with King Tut's body in it. And they took, some artifacts, and they probably took the body or some scrapings from the body and contained it, right? So this is what I was thinking about this morning, okay? So I kept thinking that this must have been the time where they must have been able to collect the stuff to possibly clone my father. Because I kept thinking, like I said, it couldn't happen. I mean, he couldn't have been born naturally. Like, I doubted the fact that he could have been impregnated by, his mother could have had him by natural means, okay? Because of the timelines just didn't make sense. But it makes sense when I think of my father, James Gordon, coming into my life later on, after the fact, okay? So my question is, and this is something that I'm doubting, I believe and suspect that and a lot of people have thought this over the years, okay? For the last year, I have been, researching, what would you call that? Repopulation reset, where, I believe, this is my theory, and a lot of people have come to the same conclusion. So, people are going to think I'm a little off, but that there's some gaps or there's some missing time. Okay, like in this particular, I got this little thing that I wrote. The information I got was kind of summarized off of Wikipedia, and he's basically saying that they excavated King Tut's tomb 3,300 years after he died. Okay, but I honestly do not believe that. I do not believe that. I suspect that this has something to do with the human reset and the readjustment of time. This is what I believe, okay? And as I go into these different slides and me doing different readings, I'm going to hopefully confirm that. We'll see as we go along, okay? Because this reading is basically about me, CB, I call it, Tut and CB. Okay, just me and CB and our relationship and how all this worked out and the pain that was and the deception and the broken hearts that got started all through this process. Okay, so let me go on to the next slide. King Tut ruled during the late 18th dynasty, and during his reign he restored the traditional polytheistic form of the ancient Egyptian religion. King Tut was one of the few kings worshipped as a deity during his lifetime. Now, forgive me for retracting or backtracking, but this story gets to be so confusing that I have to summarize this just a little bit, okay? So I believe that the 1922 excavation of King Tut's tomb led to James Calvin Gordon being cloned, okay? So Of course, they didn't clone him right away, but in 1922, I did do a reading about how C.B. Berganza played a role in the cloning of James Gordon. That's going to be in the next slide. Okay, so also the DNA of the King Tut was implanted into Louise Howland Gordon. Okay, so I believe that Louise Howland Gordon was married to Roger Gordon at the time, making Roger Gordon not my father's biological dad, but actually James Howland Gordon's stepfather. Because I do remember, my mother would tell me stories. I'm going to say Mary Gordon, okay, would tell me stories about, some tension, a little bit of tension between uh, my father, James Calvin Gordon, and Roger Gordon. And this could be the fact that they never really bonded that well. Okay. And that's very common when you have things like step families, that kind of thing. I know that compared my relationship compared to my sister's relationship with my mother, I would say that, of course, she had a better relationship because that was her blood. They were blood relations, okay? So in this case, James Calvin Gordon was not the biological son of Roger Gordon. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so what I had come to know is that I, as C.B. Berganza, played a role in James Calvin Gordon being cloned from I suppose, the DNA of King Tut. So I took this issue to the playing cards, and I really focused on the question, okay? I know the excavation occurred in 1922. At that time, my daughter, Louise Howland, was about 12 years old because she was born in 1910. Okay, but for whatever reason, I'm getting an idea that even though she was 12 years old, she was obviously too young to participate in it, but I believe there must have been some sort of plan for her to participate in it. So I was approached by church officials about the issue. Now, I'm not sure if, like I said, we're talking about timelines, about I'm saying about 11-year timeline, because 1922 and 1933, that's 11 years apart, okay? So anyway, going back to my question. Now, this looks like a 3-card spread, but I actually wanted to do individual 1-card answers. So what I did was I posed the question and I pulled 1 card, and then I wasn't happy and I pulled another one and another one. So it looks like I was doing like a past, present, future, but in actuality my goal was to only pull 1 card, but I wanted more clarification, so I kept pulling cards. Okay, so the first card that I pulled was the 2 of clubs, okay? And the interpretation that I had for that was gossip and opposition. So I really stopped, and I had to stop and think about this for a while. I'm like, okay, I can imagine the kind of gossip and the opposition that I had, okay? Because most of the gossip and opposition was directed towards me. Now, this whole thing at the time, the message that I'm getting was that I was told to remain quiet because this was about saving souls. Now, this was an issue that I believe had Christian affiliation, okay? Whether that was like through a Christian organization or it was some sort of, what do you call it, secret society that had Christian leanings, okay? But I get more of the feeling that it came from the church, okay? So the message that I wrote down when I was meditating on this is what the cloning process was carried out through churches and other affiliations. It was considered classified and top secret at that time, okay? So this is one of the ways that it was it was orchestrated. You know what I mean? So everything was basically done in secret. So I kind of had a problem with that, only because when people tell you, oh, this is top secret information, or it's quiet, or it's something you shouldn't tell other people. You wonder, okay, why, if it's something good, why do I have to be quiet about it? These are the sort of things that were coming in through my mind, like the opposition that I may have felt towards this. But still, the pressure that these sort of groups put on you is just ridiculous. So anyway, There was also opposition. The Two of Clubs also refers to the kind of opposition that I was getting at C.B. Braganza. C.B. Braganza, just like Maria Gordon, was often like bullied for his behavior. Meaning, like, you know, silly C.B. Braganza, just like Maria Gordon, has always been the kind of person who tries to make the best of a bad situation. C.B. Braganza was a pretty good dresser. He dressed well. It seems as though he was noted for, you know, trying to make his little life a little more comfortable, okay? Which is nothing big, but I will tell you, and I think it's really important for me to emphasize, and I'm going to get a little bit more into the dark pathology of these particular groups later, but the whole thing is that there was, people were against CB and used, you know, him being a nice dresser against him. Now I'm going to just go ahead and tell you this really quick. C.B. Braganza was somebody who also recognized his unhappiness a lot. And this is one of the reasons why I indulge in things that kind of make me feel better. And as you can tell in the pictures that I've shown of C.B. Braganza, he's a pretty well-dressed person. But this is something that, you know, racist people resent when it comes to people of color. So he dealt with that opposition at C.B. Braganza as well. Also, you know, the issue of soul transfer, it's not that C.B. Braganza couldn't grasp the concept of soul transfer, because it makes sense. And I, as Maria Gordon, I talk about soul transfer as well. I think it's important to understand that when it comes to souls, once we pass on, okay, if our soul isn't trapped, or if it's not like, you know, what do we call it, wallowing in something negative, or it's not refusing to move on, it has this sort of flexibility, right? And I understand that, you know, people who passed on, who've made it to heaven or the heavenly state, they can come and go from heaven to earth as much as they want to. They like the flexibility. But souls can also be called into vessels, okay? And this is part of the cloning process. Vessels can be brought in through reincarnation, through cloning, or it can also be done, of course, through natural birth. That would be like, you know, through sexual intercourse. Okay, so that was one of my issues. You know, I didn't quite understand how the whole process worked, but it, you know, I kept thinking, I don't know if you could like construct a body. I didn't understand the whole process. Okay, so the other issue is that, okay, now 1922, I did not get any opposition from the king at that time. Now the king at that time was King George V, right? Who I believe wanted me to have some sort of participation in this. Okay, now the timelines, I said, you know, they're kind of wonky, but these are the messages that I got. Okay, so the second card, I kept thinking, okay, I understand the opposite. I'm going to go ahead and pull another card just because. Okay, so I got the Joker card, which is an intelligent person with spiritual insight, sudden good fortune with pleasant surprises. Okay, that's obviously C.B. Braganza. And then the last card that I pulled up was the Jack of Hearts, which indicates a pregnancy or new baby. So this right here was me, I guess, maybe being the one who kind of endorses it or approves of, at some point, you know, my daughter having being a vessel, like, or being the person who's going to carry the new child. Okay, which is crazy. Like I said, at the time, Louise was only 12 years old, so it wouldn't be till 11 years later, when she was like 22 years old, that she would give birth to James Calvin Gordon. But this must have been something that was planned for quite a long time. So I decided to put away the playing cards, and like I had mentioned, I had assigned, not definitions, but interpretations to the tarot cards, just the major arcana, which it consists of 22 different cards. And so I looked at each particular card, and I just said, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, just look at the card. What does it feel like? What kind of profession did I feel as though matched the cards, right? So I assigned cloning assistant to aliens, the origins of mankind are kept secret to the magician card. Okay, so when I asked the question, what was CB's job in the cloning process of King Tut slash James Calvin Gordon? Like I said, I pulled the magician card, and let me read the definition again, or the interpretation. It's cloning assistant to aliens. The origins of mankind are kept secret. Okay, and because I wanted to dig a little bit different, and this particular one card spread for occupations can be used in different ways. For example, I asked who offered CB this job opportunity, okay, as being like this whole cloning assistant, okay, and the card that I pulled was the Hierophant, okay, and the interpretation that I assigned to the Hierophant to describe occupation, it was tradition, organized religion. Now, I had pulled another card because I kept thinking, all right, I kept thinking, okay, you can work for an organization. Like, for example, my father worked for NASA, right? NASA doesn't have uh, any obvious direct connections to any religion, okay? But we all know that religions can infiltrate institutions such as, like, companies, organizations, and structures, right? So, like, for example, I know that my dad was bullied, like, literally to death from Christians, right? Christian organizations. So I wanted to know, like, okay, I'm asking, I want to dig another a little bit more. So I asked another a question that would require just one card, okay? Because this is what I've been doing, just one card. I'm trying to make things easy, okay? So the next card that I pulled was the World card, okay? And I'm not showing you the World card. I'm just telling you right now, because we have the Magician. We know that I worked as some sort of alien, a cloning assistant to aliens, okay, through a religious organization. And when I asked a little bit more about this, I said, okay, from where? Like, was I working for the government? Was I doing this? Was I doing that? Where is it? So the World card, I interpret it as politics. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So this was a political move of some sort, okay? So now I'm going to go on to the next slide. Now, from what I understand, and do keep in mind that we're talking about timelines between 1922 and 1933, which is when um, James Calvin Gordon was born. At that time, the king was King George V, and it seems as though he encouraged the cloning collaboration with Louise Howland, which would be my daughter, and I must have been in a position to authorize Louise to get to be cloned or as her parent or something like this. Okay. Now I was told by my family that Louise was raised by her mother's family here in the United States, someplace in Chicago. But still, I don't know how all that works out, but I will definitely be letting you know as I find out more information. But whether she lived in the same house as me or I visited her in Chicago, what I do know is that I was fully aware of these plans of her being, I believe, injected, however that works, okay, with DNA in order to bring about the new offspring. Okay. Now, George V, I get downloads about his perception and how he viewed CB Berganza. Apparently, there was just like there is today. There's a mixed view or bag of views about me. Okay, but a lot of white people have always been pretty, what do you call it? Amazed by CB Berganza, and I would say overall, it seems as though King George V had, a lot of admiration and respect for C.B. Berganza. He was amazed by him. Okay, so he also knew that even though C.B. Berganza had limitations, he fully believed in his capabilities. Also, he felt as though the arrangement of, I believe C.B. Berganza was, being able to support himself with the jobs that were supplied through this particular network, okay? And of course, this was heavily influenced by this particular Christian doctrine, which I'm going to be getting into a little bit more, because this is where the plot thickens, okay? Now, I keep getting these intuitive downloads. This is a download only, okay? I have not confirmed it with any cards, any other additional cards, but for some reason, now we all know that I've had some sort of tie-in with this whole situation as my life is Maria Gordon, okay? But now I want to go back a little bit more into who C.B. Berganza was married to at the time. Now, I was doing just a general reading that last time I made a video, and I made a lot of assumptions because I see that I had a wife. It seems like we got along okay. You know what I mean? It seemed like it was okay. I even must have felt like I had some sort of affection for this person. So I assumed at that time that we were talking about my soulmate, which would be James Gordon, right? Whatever, okay? So I left it at that. But then I kept thinking, okay, that doesn't really make any sense because I was captured from Ethiopia by myself. So what are the odds that, you know, my soulmate was going to be in England so that we could have this connection? I kept thinking, I don't know about that. So it kind of bothered me, but I did know enough, okay? For whatever reason, and this sounds crazy. I mean, you could laugh at you if you want to, and I will confirm this later at some point, but I have this download message that I was married to a white woman as C.B. Berganza, okay? And my wife, weird, okay, was, guys, I feel really embarrassed by saying this. I get the feeling that my wife at the time could have possibly been Kate Middleton, okay, in another past life, okay? I don't know how that works, but whatever. Okay, so anyway, Louise, when she was about 22 years old, okay, she was injected with, I guess, the DNA scrapings or however that works with King Tut's DNA, whatever, okay? So my father, James Gordon, was born from her womb. This is what I get. And Roger, who was married to Louise, was the stepfather, okay? You know, it's funny, when I think of, I'm just going to kind of step aside really quick because I'm kind of sharing my thoughts about this whole ideology, okay? Now, I'm comparing a lot of the clone births, okay, to the birth of, okay, like for example, Jesus. We're talking about chosen ones, okay? Now, when you think about Jesus' birth, right? Jesus was what? Born of a virgin. Mysterious, no sexual intercourse between, you know, the entity that impregnated Mary, right? She just ended up pregnant, right? And so the chosen one, which would be Jesus, was also raised by who? A stepfather, Joseph, right? So I'm seeing something like a little pattern going on here. So this is like, to me, I believe that it's a part of this whole program. You know what I mean? And that the whole idea of Jesus kind of correlates to this whole cloning issue. This is where I'm getting, okay? And if you have any disagreements, please go ahead and let me know in the comment box. But this is what I'm getting in my mind, okay? Now, the message I got was is that I was made a girl on purpose in the cloning process, okay? Because apparently there was a lot of people who bullied me, and I will say that this process, this experiment that I was a part of, was about hurting me over and over and over again. It was basically set up for me to have my life end, right? It was a part of the Joseph Mengele idea, okay? And like I said, anytime you, whether Joseph Mengele was a part of it or not, okay? If you let bullying get out of control, it's going to get sick, it's going to get pathological, and it's going to get deadly, okay? But I was always harassed as C.B. Berganza, mainly for racial reasons, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you what racist white people will do to black people, because my mom told me a story. Now, my mom, I'm talking about my stepmother, okay? She said she had some sisters, okay? Her sisters were very beautiful, and her sisters had very long hair for black women, okay? Now, on my stepmom's side, there's white in her family, and so the mixture made it so that these girls had very long hair. So my mom would tell me that these white women would come over to the house and try to imply that it was for their best interest for the girls to cut their hair, right? Because, why? Because these white women were jealous of it. They were going to pick it apart. It was part of their bullying tactics, right? Okay, same thing with C.B. Braganza's clothes. Okay, C.B. Braganza obviously had an eclectic interest in clothes, and this is something that kind of pressed on white supremacy. There is nothing wrong with C.B. Braganza wearing nice clothes. Okay, so I personally think that in the process of cloning, they may have given me a little bit too many genes or a little bit less genes or whatever, however that works, okay? And they ended up creating me as a woman, okay? Now, what pissed them off is like, I wasn't trying to piss anybody off. I'm just somebody who always rolls with the punches, right? So I'm a girl. Guess what? I turned out girly, okay? And they wanted to bully me because what they wanted me to maybe do was feel shame. I don't know what they wanted, okay? But I'm going to tell you that when it comes to the bullying, and I'm going to get a little bit more as to why this bullying gets so out of control. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the mentality, the ideology, and how, and the pathology, and of course, what is the underlying problem as to how and why it gets as sick and dark as it does. Okay, but yes, I was made a girl on purpose, and I do know that when it comes to white supremacy, they do like to make black people, men specifically, they do like to make them look more effeminate. You've seen like on movies and stuff like that where they show black men in dresses, in drag, or whatever. This is a form of disrespect, okay? So little do they know, though, I had no problem being a woman, okay? As a matter of fact, I love it. So, you can't make me feel ashamed about that. As far as, me being a girly girl and showing it and expressing it with my hair, my clothes, or whatever, legally I have the right to do that. So anyway, now I wanted to go back to the religious aspect of it because it's very important, okay? Now this whole thing was a result of, and the reason why this whole thing was created is, and I don't know, I am not an expert on who exactly these aliens were. I am not an expert, but I do know that and believe that these were like archons, okay? And I'm going to go a little bit more into the archons in a little bit, okay? But this whole thing about the cloning process, let me explain who was supposed to be cloned, who was expected to be cloned, and who they went after. Okay, now it was people who were of royal descent, not English royal descent. Perhaps maybe they were, if they did not accept Christianity. Okay, these were people who were not associated with Christianity. The point is to make them Christian, to get them involved in this cloning process, I believe. Okay, so and the purpose of it, okay, is to have their souls called back to earth to live an earthly existence again. All right. And what ends up happening is it's basically something that was, King George V, okay, and possibly if the cloning process is older than 1922, which I believe that it was, okay, and I'm going to get into that too later. But if King George and the royal family at that time had wanted to resurrect people that they looked at as rivals, okay, even though, like, for example, I guess I was obvious one of these rivals or something, even though I don't have anything in my heart that even cares about the argument, okay? But whatever the case is, we were brought back as clones, okay? Now, I found it interesting. Now, when I was growing up as a Marine Corps, everybody knows that I studied religion, okay? And I also studied with Jehovah's Witnesses as a kid, and seriously considered converting to it. Now, all of these particular religions, even though they have different doctrinal beliefs, some of them are pretty different than the other, okay? Like, for example, Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses seem to believe and support the idea of cloning, or at least I could say that they support the idea of having a new Earth, okay? And I would say the concept of the new Earth is biblical, okay? It is biblical, the idea of it, okay? Now, but still, when it, whether they're called Jehovah's Witnesses, whether they're Mormons, Catholics, Roman Catholics, Baptists, okay, Protestants, all the Christian denominations, okay, we're all associated in this issue, okay. So I know when I was younger, I used to study not just, okay, I formally studied with Jehovah's Witnesses, but I remember getting the Book of Mormon. I remember reading that because I found it fascinating, okay. Now, Mormons, okay, were very careful. I don't know how they changed their doctrine, but when I was younger, they weren't allowed to take birth control. Okay, Mormons thought it was important to what? Bring back people who were not baptized or converted into their religion. A few years ago, I remember reading an article about some Jews who were upset that some Mormons decided to baptize, because they have this thing called the baptismal of the dead, okay? So they had some relatives that were Jewish, and they decided to baptize them, okay? Now, so they were upset about it, because obviously they didn't want any part of it, okay? And then also when it comes to Mormons, you notice that they have very large families, at least they used to, okay? Why? Because like I said, the whole purpose was to have these people back here on the earth, okay? And who pushed this idea? Who pushed this idea? This was a collaboration between King George's Fifth group and these alien people, okay? This alien people doing this whole cloning process, the cloning process of bringing back people of yesteryear into the new age, okay? Now, so I would say all the churches are, including Jehovah's Witnesses, and I would say it's especially Jehovah's Witnesses. Why? Because like I said, Jehovah's Witnesses don't ever believe that they are going to heaven, except for a select group, which would be like, to them it's 144,000. They believe in the new earth. So most Jehovah's Witnesses, I would say the Jehovah's Witnesses that you encounter, unless of course their doctrine has changed, believe that they are going to be living on a new earth. Okay, and we'll talk about the possibility of a new earth in another slide, okay? Now, how this whole thing worked is that people who were considered rivals of the crown, or people who were not Christian, were came back, right? They came back, all right? They came back. So, like for example, if you joined a church and you got baptism records, I believe what they did was they sent these records to a centralized location that would set it up so that you can become eligible to be on this cloning list. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the new earth, okay? The new earth, okay? The idea of new earth. Now, when I think about this, and I could be wrong, okay? And I would love people's feedback on this, okay? Now, when I think about the new earth, okay, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the new earth had special, it offered more than what this earth does now, okay? Like, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that in the new earth set up, like, for example, people would be perfect. Perfect. Okay, now people look at me and they think, oh, yeah, I'm a goody two shoes and stuff like that. But this is their belief. They believe that people would be perfect, like they wouldn't commit sin. And see, and the only way that you cannot commit sin is to be 100% satisfied. Okay, so it's very difficult for most governments to establish that sort of thing. I'm not saying it can't happen because when it comes to something as holy as the universal force, God, whatever you want to call it, anything's possible. But it seems as though you would have to, through the cloning process, which that would be the only way that would be possible, they would have to weed out the negative traits of each and every person. Okay, like like for example, my DNA is made up of specific people. Okay, I have the blood of the wife of King Tut. Okay, I know that. But I've lived other lives. Okay, so I would say Egyptian blood that I know of. All right, and then I also have I'm a mixture of Egyptian and I have a little bit of Greek blood because the person who birthed me is of, what do you call it, African and Greek ancestry, right? Because she's Cleopatra. Now, I acquired all those traits, but if there's a way that you can you modify behavior in the clothing process? I don't know. Okay. Also, in the New Earth, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, people would reach a certain age. Like, well, yeah, they would reach a certain age because, in most religions, things like eternal youth is like the ultimate goal. Youth is associated with, happiness, joy, everyday being new, being giddy, lively, full of vitality, blah 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 blah. So Jehovah's Witnesses would believe that there's going to be a time where, you reach a certain age and you don't get any older. You know what I mean? But and colognes be designed that way to be like immortal? Okay, because as we have it now, clones reach a certain age and they die. Okay, in my case, the CB Braganza, I probably given a few years later, because I died at 95. Had I lived longer, maybe I would have ended up dying of old age. Who knows? Okay, but unless can they design clones to be truly immortal, not get to a certain age and then switch out vessels? I don't know. Also, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, the new earth is supposed to be, perfect vegetation. Like, how we have to like fight and like battle things like weeds and pestilence and stuff like that. There's not supposed to be any of that. Okay, so maybe their expectations are a little too high. But do I believe a possibility of a new earth? I do believe that there's a possibility of a better setup. You know what I mean? But I personally believe in my heart that the ultimate goal is to get to heaven and stay there. Okay, we can be allured back in with other vessels, but that might be for some people, but I ain't doing it. So, no thank you. Okay, so then the next message I got was I wanted to talk a little bit more about the reset, okay? Okay, so the reset. The reset was shaking things around. Like I had mentioned earlier in this video about, people from Egypt, true Egyptian, black Egyptians were taken out of Egypt and slightly moved over a little bit to Ethiopia, okay, to kind of shake things up. Now we have people who have a lighter complexion and they're inhabiting Egypt and everything is kind of messed up and kind of confused, okay? But basically, I started off in Egypt and I ended up in Ethiopia. Okay, I do remember doing in my first reading that I had 88 lives. Now, I believe I had mentioned in the earlier part of this video that I believe that the timelines are skewed for a specific reason, and this is why to create some sort of belief that, to reestablish things. Okay. Just like that message that I got about me being involved in politics. I wasn't involved in politics, but it looks as though the job that I had at CB Braganza had some sort of church affiliation. And when I asked for more information, it related to politics. The reason why is because it has an expectation of all of these people who were resurrected through the cloning process to basically be rivals of people of the crown at that time. Okay, to be forced into being converted into Christianity. Okay, so C.B. Braganza never formalized religion by baptism. He never accepted Christianity. He never accepted it. Okay, so he went along with it. He went along with the cloning process. He did all of that, but he never formalized getting baptized or anything like that, because sooner or later, he always had a suspicion that something weird was wrong. He was not comfortable with that whole process of the cloning, and then just saying certain things that he noticed, and I probably noticed here in this life as Maria Gordon, as red flags of me not wanting to be a part of it. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide, and I want to talk a little bit more about how the human reset, how I suspect, okay, like I am not an authority on this subject, but this is some of the things I'm talking about and some of these ideas that I'm posing here. And I will do readings, deeper readings on this later to get confirmation. But this is some of the ideas that are floating around in my mind, how all of this stuff happened and how this story comes together. So let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, I wanted to pitch this theory a little bit because I'm putting a connection between these postcards and my life as C.B. Berganza / Prince Alamehu, and of course the cloning of King Tut, right? Now, a lot of people have seen these postcards, and I'm going to ask these white viewers of mine to pay a little close attention to this screen right now. Now, you'll notice these little kids in these postcards. You don't see any darker colored kids in here, okay? These kids are, I'm going to say, probably from the United States and Britain, or I should say Europe, okay? So Europe and the United States. Okay, but from the 1900s, from 1900 to the 1920s, these postcards were circulated in both areas, okay? So cards were sent throughout the country here, and they were also sent in, massive places in Europe like Germany, Holland, Belgium, these places, okay? And there were these little depictions of cute little babies. Sometimes these kids were posing, in certain positions. Sometimes they had certain themes to them, okay? And during this time period is when people were suspecting that we had all these kids that were being created as cloning, through the cloning process, okay? And a lot of these depictions were of kids' heads being popped up or being birthed or being brought to life through things like cabbages, all right? So, and there's like thousands of these cards in existence and in circulation. And of course, some people have, saved them. They're kind of like antiques and they're collector's items, and you see them a lot on things like Pinterest, okay? Now, I will tell you, there was a time, because of this, okay, this like influx of babies basically being generated out of nowhere, okay, which I suspect anyway, that these babies were all clones, okay, of the cloning process. So I had mentioned before in my video that I did on one of my original readings, and I was also making some, guesses based off the information that I was gathering, that the cloning process maybe started somewhere in the 30s. I'm going to say that because I'm, throwing in this whole issue of the postcards, these, what they call them, formally, are repopulation postcards, is what they are, okay? And these are the depictions of these little kids, doing cute little things and cute little poses, some coming out of cabbages, some are being seen underneath leaves and stuff like that, foliage, okay? What these cards were to advertise babies for sale. Okay, they used to sell these babies, okay? Why? Because these babies were clones. Now, I had heard of stories throughout my life and even talked to a lot of older white people because, I remember working in a convalescent hospital. I remember I would get the wrong number and I would be in conversation with some old lady who was lonely. Okay, I remember people telling, they wouldn't say they were clones, but looking back, I'm starting to think, okay, wait, this one lady was telling me that she was forced into some sort of arranged marriage with somebody, and I listened to this lady for about an hour. Now I'm starting to understand this big problem. Now these people, this generation, like I said, of clones, I suspect go back further than the 1930s. I'm going to think, and I'm even starting to have my suspicions about Prince Alamehu and how he was created. And I will go back a little bit more into that later. But anyway, so these cards that, these postcards that were, popular in the United States and in England, okay? I'm going to show you a few of them, and I'm going to go a little bit more into my suspicions of Prince Alamehu possibly being directly created by aliens in the next slides. Okay, so I just want to kind of go over some of these little postcards because, like I said, some of them are really cute. What I do like about, I've always loved surrealistic art, okay? Anything weird, you know, Maria likes it, okay? But these postcards are like the epitome of weird. Look at all these little kids just, whoops, springing out of cabbages, right? You got this guy, he's tending to them and everything. Okay, so this, I'm going to say this postcard was probably somewhere between the 1900s and the 1920s. I'm going to say earlier 1900s, right? But just by looking at that guy's pants, right? So a lot of these kids, this is what I'm speculating is that, and you know, I'm not sure. I'm going to do some readings on this, you know, when I get the chance to write these questions down and follow up. But this is what I believe. Okay. This reset was, of course, of people. These little babies that you see depicted. This could be a big slew of different people from different backgrounds of royal lineage, okay, or a combination of people who just never either had anything to do with Christianity or whatever. Just the people that I would say at the time, you know, King George V, just whatever. I wouldn't say who was in reign at that time. Actually, that's actually earlier than that. I believe maybe Queen Victoria at the time. I'm trying to remember who was like really in power and stepping up to the plate. But anyway, these kids right here could have grew up, right, and been some of the actors and actresses. Some maybe these people could have been big political people or whatever. Okay, these people are the clones that are well known. Who's to say? This could have been one of these little kids in this group of patches. I'm being silly, okay, but I'm trying to make a point, okay? One of these little Cabbage Patch kids could have been Frank Sinatra, could have been Dean Martin, could have been, you know, whatever. I'm just saying is that these groups of kids are, I suspect, are clones, just like me, who had to be put in families that didn't necessarily appreciate them. You know, they were set up in abusive situations, but they, whatever the case is, these kids pretty much ended up being woven into society. Some took on, you know, I would say big positions, okay? Some of the actors of that time period, like for example, that's the 1900s. Let's just say, for example, one of those kids was Frank Sinatra. I don't know exactly how old or what year he was born in, okay? But he grew up to be Frank Sinatra. He ended up being an actor. But he was possibly could have been raised by parents that weren't his parents. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, this is just my theory, okay? And we'll follow up later. Whatever the case is, we know that, you know, looking at census records, okay, there was a time in the 1800s where there wasn't very many people on the earth, and then all of a sudden there's like this influx of overpopulation of kids out of nowhere. You know what I mean? So that shows you that something is going on, okay? And then there's been reports like, you know, I look at comment sections a lot. And I look at blogs because, you know, when I started thinking about this issue of these kids, you know, these repopulation kids or Cabbage Patch kids, you know, I started looking into it, you know, Googling more, trying to find out more information. Apparently there's a book called The Children of the Mud Flood. I believe I have not read it, but it goes in a little bit more into this idea. But I'm tying it into my theories as to who these bunches of kids are, okay? Because obviously they're not kids who were created out of the womb. And these postcards were meant to advertise them for sale. And I've heard stories from people who've talked about, like there was this, when I lived in Rosemont, I knew this one lady who would tell stories about how she knew of another lady who was bragging that she would sell her kid for $50 or anybody who was the highest bidder. Then I've read about stories where kids were sold for $5. Some of these kids that you see in these little Cabbage Patches could have like been bought for field workers. You know, boys were needed on the farm a long time ago. Like if, you know, there was a family, maybe a husband and wife, they might have been elderly, they might have needed some extra help. So one of these kids could be purchased. You see what I'm saying? So these clones were meant to be rivals and put in lowly positions in life. You know what I mean? Because this was something that I believe, King George probably thought was a good idea and made him feel good about himself a little bit. So or Queen Victoria or whatever. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now, if you Google orphan trains, you're going to find a subject that's very similar. Basically, the orphan trains were the forms of transporting all these children, right? And if you look at this picture, you'll notice that not all of the kids that are on this train are depicted as infants. Okay, it looks like there's some toddlers and possibly some kids that look like they could be around 6 years old. Okay, so some of these kids obviously they're orphans and they were getting transported. Why do I keep thinking of my intuitive messages? Like I said, I'm going to be doing some more readings on this in the future because I'm really interested in these kids. But these are the messages that are coming through my mind right now, is that these kids were supposed to be distributed much like how I was distributed, okay? Like they're supposed to be adopted in certain families and they probably got special favors for that, right? Like, guarantee better employment, stability, that kind of stuff, okay? So, but this is just an example. Now, I've seen pictures of not only kids being transported in trains, but I've also seen pictures of kids like floating in air balloons, airplanes, boats. It just shows different depictions in these postcards of kids traveling in every possible way you can imagine. Okay, now some of my intuitive downloads that I got earlier about these kids is that I got when it comes to like the Dust Bowl, like I live here in Bakersfield, right? And I think a lot of the people who've lived here for such a very long time, there seems to be some sort of correlation between the Dust Bowl, the Bakersfield, and also I get the feeling that there's a lot of people here who might have been some of the group, some of these people. Anyway, I'm going to go on to the next slide real quick. Okay, so now we have this other postcard, right? And it's really cute. Look at the little kid on the, I don't know what you call it, like a little edge of the bridge or whatever. He's sitting here looking at the stork. Now, the stork, has been known and depicted on, cards even to this day, especially for people who are getting cards to welcome a new baby, And I know a lot of people have been told, when they were little, I would say the generation before mine, like if they asked their mom, where do babies come from? Then you know what their parents would tell them? The stork brought it. The stork brought that baby. And a lot of kids grew up very naive, thinking that kids were actually brought into life through these means because they were told this, okay? Sadly, some of I would call this whole thing like a part of the programming. This like here, these stories, okay? Because some people actually took this stuff literally, which is funny to me, right? Sad, but funny, okay? So anyway, what I got some intuitive messages as I was, thumbing through these cloning postcards, which are actually called, repopulation postcards. And I, suggest you guys Google this information. If you could check out People of the Mud Flood, or I think that's what it's called. You might want to check that out too. I'm going to be doing some more reading on this because, like I said, this whole reset is putting things into perspective, okay? And, I've heard of these things before, but now I'm starting to see that there's like this whole, it's bigger than that. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so now, this is my theory, okay? Because there was a lot of talk about a lot of people were put in insane asylums, okay, back in the late 1800s and I would say the 1930s. As a matter of fact, here in the United States as well as in Europe, there seems to be a lot of abandoned insane asylums, okay? I suspect, and I would love to hear your theory on this, okay, that during the reset, okay, people who were wiser, who kind of like, wait a second, something's going on here, if they were kind of asking too many questions, that was a place that they ended up. Now, I do remember, I forgot who wrote this book, and I hope I can like look up the information. I hope remember look up the information. But in the 1920s, okay, there was a lady who wanted to go and investigate what life was like in an insane asylum because there were so many people being put in insane asylums, okay, at that time. I personally think the reason why they were put inside the insane asylums, like, because they either were people who did not want to comply with Christianity's forceful ways, who were wise to this weird population plan, all right? People who were asking questions, people who were not blind, because, like, they use, what do you call it, mind control tactics, just like they used on me. Mind control tactics, I'm this, I'm that, so that it prevents people from asking questions, okay? So in this case, if people were a little bit onto something, they ended up in an insane asylum. So this particular lady, and hopefully I will find her name and put it in the description box. She was like a journalist, and she wanted to investigate what was going on in the insane asylum. Okay, and basically she went in there as a very sane person, and she said by the time she left, she felt like she was insane. Okay, so if you go in there, if a person was like, wise to what was going on, this whole reset just didn't quite make sense, and they ended up going into the insane asylum, eventually you will become insane in the insane asylum. Okay, especially if you feel like you're stuck in there, you're trapped. And they did a lot of behavior modification type things to people back then, like electric shock therapy, just stupid therapies that they did back then for the mentally insane. Okay, so I believe that the reason why we have so many of those abandoned insane asylums is because certain people either knew too much or weren't comfortable with it. So they ended up in these insane asylums. Okay, so what else? Okay, the other message I'm getting is that there are other, okay, and of course, now I've seen other black actors, I've seen black singers, I've seen black actors, black people who are even involved in politics, right? Okay, so there were other Egyptian people who have been cloned. Okay, the only difference between me and the other ones is that me and my father, James Calvin Gordon, also known as King Tut, were known as gods. Okay. Okay, so I had also mentioned, like, many celebrities of yesteryear and today, many of the celebrities of yesteryear could have possibly been on that orphan train. And many of those celebrities that were on that orphan train could possibly be celebrities now. The same person, just in a different vessel. Okay, for example, I love Agnes Moorehead. Okay, but actually I think actually it doesn't matter. Agnes Moorehead, for example, she was the mother on Bewitched. Okay, she was the flamboyant lady with the red hair, the tricky like makeup, and she was always looking cool. And she always popped in at the most opportune time, looking fabulous. Okay, so let's just say, for example, Agnes Moorehead was one of those Cabbage Patch Kids, right? Then once she passed away, she could have possibly been cloned into something else, someone else. You know what I mean? This is just my theory. Okay, so we're on that orphan train. So yeah, that's one of my thoughts. Okay, what other thought did I have? Oh, okay. Now, a lot of people make the comparison of when it comes to the first thing that popped in my mind when I learned of these children, these repopulation cards. Okay, the first thing that I assumed, okay, was that this was the original start of the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? That's what I thought. Before I start reading into it, the first thing I saw, the first headline about repopulation cards, and I saw these kids in these little cabbages, I was assuming that they were connected to the Cabbage Patch Kids. Hang on a second. I'm going to start another slide real quick. Now, as I was talking about the Cabbage Patch Kids, it just dawned on me that I have a favorite doll that just happens to be a Cabbage Patch. Is that a coincidence or what? It just occurred to me. My favorite doll is a Cabbage Patch Kid. Now, I don't know. One thing about my Cabbage Patch Kid is that I got mine at an estate sale. Now, most people know that Cabbage Patch Kids come with a little adoption certificate or something like that, right? Which is one of the reasons why it seems so real. That's one of the reasons I think that it appealed to so many people. Now, during this craze, I was in the 6th grade at the time, and at that age, most kids, I would say, kind of shy away from baby dolls and stuff like that. But Maria, you know what? Maria, me, okay,
I have never outgrown dolls. If I think it's cute, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to put it in my room. I don't care what other people think. I think it's cute and adorable. So at the time, I really wasn't into the Cabbage Patch Kids. Okay, this particular Cabbage Patch is, I believe, like a Cabbage Patch preemie or something, and he has a cloth face. If you remember the original Cabbage Patch Kids, they had more of a little bit of a different face. Okay, and the kids, the little dolls, were all made unique. Some had red hair, short hair, long hair, black hair. They came in different skin colors, and they came with all the little official type stuff. Now, like I said, I found my little Cabbage Patch Kid at an estate sale, so I didn't get his birth certificate. So I guess that makes him double the orphan, right? He doesn't have any papers. anyway, when it comes to the Cabbage Patch Kids, I would think that the only similarity is that it's making reference, okay, to these kids who basically were grown in cabbages, meaning they came into existence other than being formulated in the womb. Also, I have not really delved too deeply into the Cabbage Patch legend, but there is some sort of tie-in when it comes to them being treated like, kind of like slaves, okay, in some of their little storybooks that they talk about, the Cabbage Patch Kids. I am not somebody who was like a big Cabbage Patch Kid, like, what do you call it, fanatic at the time. Like I said, the only reason I fell in love with this Cabbage Patch Kid, like when I saw him at the estate sale, he was flipped upside down so I could not see his face, but I was just curious, so I flipped him over, I looked at his face, and I just fell in love. And for like weeks on end, I was holding that baby for the longest time, just holding it close. It just brought me so much comfort, I cannot tell you, okay? And it just so happens to be a Cabbage Patch Kid. Okay, so going back to the Cabbage Patch Kids, okay, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that when it comes to the cloning process. Okay, so these kids, much like myself, okay, this is what I'm getting, okay, that the similar thing is a lot of these kids get abused a lot, much like myself. And in the story of the Cabbage Patch Kids, they also are abused, and they get treated almost like in a slave-like manner, okay? Very much like my situation. And while I was doing a lot of my readings, my intuitive readings, as well as some of my card readings, I didn't want to sit here and set up like the screen showing you each and every card I pulled. But I also see that my father experienced the same sort of abuse that I experienced, okay? And one of the reasons why is because, you get a lot of, you get bullied into, the whole point of it is to bully you, okay, basically. So during the 1970s, when my dad was working at NASA, and during the 70s and 80s, he was pretty much the equivalent of what I had to go through. He was going through a lot, you know what I mean? And this is a message that I got. So I'm gonna switch slides now, because I'm not necessarily talking about Cabbage Patch Kids at this moment. I was just bringing up the Cabbage Patch Kids because I do see a tie-in, okay? And I don't know if the originator of the Cabbage Patch Kids made it so because it was based off of what he might have known maybe from his grandmother or the stories that were circulating around. He may have not been somebody who was, what do you call it, mind controlled or brainwashed, because I will tell you, a lot of these kids, much like myself, are not awake. They have never woken up. Just like, my sister and my family and the kids that used to know me never thought of me as a clone. They never thought of me as, whatever. They never really realized or registered in their mind that there's something funny and odd about their origins. Okay? So, anyway, I do find all of this very interesting, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to say that most kids have no idea that they're in a setup. Like, all these years, I had no idea that I was adopted. Okay? The secrets are kept from the target / the chosen one. Okay? Some of these kids, who may have been brought over by the orphan trains, or some people who are a little bit more around my age or even younger or whatever generation of clone that you are, It's like, maybe you can relate to this, because I don't think the majority of these kids grow up knowing that they're clones. I don't believe that. I don't see how that they could do that. It's, at least in my situation, no one ever told me that. I just knew that I was like, it was like, I had mentioned before in one of my videos, like I would wake up in the middle of the night to hear my sister and my mom laughing, and it was keeping me up, so I would tell them to be quiet. And then they would kind of like talk about me behind my back, because I was different. I was set, I'm set up in a family that's not really of my exact DNA. Like, my mother, Mary Gordon, she was my stepmother. Okay, which means that she did not have like a maternal bond with me that she would with a child that she gave birth to, and had some sort of closeness to. So I'm the outsider, you know, and so you go up wondering why. Okay, they never tell you that the reason why. Now I'm going to be doing some readings in the future as to, did my sister, when we were children, know who I was? She may have knew that I was adopted, but did she know who I was? I get the feeling that my sister Tanya knew. The reason why is because my sister Tanya felt very paranoid and very pressured, and it always had something to do with religion. And I do believe that my sister Tanya was targeted because maybe because she was like used as an informant, a sort of something or whatever. I will go into that at some other time if I even care to do that. Okay. But all I know is that, throughout my life, especially when I got into the first grade, I started noticing that there was a little bit too much attention on me. Okay. And I didn't really know why. You know what I mean? And I noticed that I was getting bullied a lot, but no one would tell me why. And see, now that I understand what the rumors were, this, the story and all of this, you can tell that this is a setup to hurt somebody and destroy someone from the inside out. Because, you never have a chance or an opportunity to defend yourself. Here I am, like, walking around and just wanting to have a normal life, and be friends with the other kids, and just live a normal existence, right? But that was impossible to do because these people thought that I was something wicked, right? Because this is the kind of label that they slap on you, mainly to keep you isolated. Okay, they do this to keep you isolated, make it so that you do not have a support system. And when it came to the whole bullying aspect of it, it was something that they really enjoyed. As a chosen one or target of this sort of campaign, as a child, the child is bullied and gossiped about to keep them isolated. And then underneath that, I wrote, the adult is bullied and gossiped about to keep them isolated. Now, they do this because it is a part of, like in my case, it was a part of an experiment. How did they, how am I supposed to react or whatever? There's a lot of dehumanization, and that's done on purpose. Okay, these sort of setups is to keep you basically subservient, in a subservient position, in a demeaning type position, in a way that is meant to basically have someone exert power in a forceful nature over you. Remember, this was a program that was initiated by the royal family at that time for religious purposes. So the goal is to basically force you into conversion. Okay. Now, I know I was bullied when I was a kid. Okay, it starts off subtle and then it picks up. And then, as an adult, I was bullied. And there's no way in the world that somebody who did not have some sort of intuitive ability could have figured out the kind of nonsense and knots that these people had put in and created. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so very grateful for my gift, okay? Because there's no way in the world somebody could have figured that out. That the whole Prince Alamehu and all this other stuff is like, wow, very grateful for this, okay? But you know, the lives of targeted individuals are one of major suffering. Okay, now as I'm telling you this, I want you to remember these key words. Okay, we're talking about suffering, we're talking about being bullied, we're talking about religion here. Okay, we're talking about basically somebody um, raising children, right? And holding grudges against that child and never having a direct and open conversation as to why they have that sort of resentment towards that child. And this pours over to the peers of that child. You know, like for example, your friends start treating you different because they see that your parent doesn't respect you, and so on and down the line, right? So, how in the world could you know how to fix your behavior? You don't. It is designed that way. That is this program is designed and based on a covert nature so that you implode in on yourself. Okay, the goal was to have me commit suicide. So I was never supposed to know what was wrong with me. I was supposed to just shrug my shoulders and say something along the lines like, "Oh well, you know what? Nobody likes me. It's all my fault," and me take all the blame for what happened. That's how it's designed. This is why it's the covert nature of this program. Okay, this is exactly the reason why nobody ever had a face-to-face conversation with me and told me exactly what their grievance was. You know, why is it that none of these people talk to me? Why is it that these people just started ignoring me? It's because it was all a part of a program. So yes, isolation, being gossiped about, and being bullied is something that you go through as a targeted individual. Okay. So when you think about the family dynamic of the target, you are the scapegoat and the black sheep by design. Okay. You are the person that everybody takes all their frustration out on. If they're not happy with their life, they know that they can hurt you, and you will have absolutely no support, and you will be left on your own to deal with it. Okay, and because there's a lot of mind control in this, okay, it will never occur to them that they're the ones who are causing the problem, and that's they're causing the problem by design. Okay, like I said, this whole program operates on mind control. Okay, now I was the scapegoat in my family. Okay, you know, and the reason why I was never allowed to know why. Okay, but the reason why is because I was C.B. Berganza, okay, who had a reputation of not being a part of the Christian church, okay, and somebody who wanted to stick with their origins, okay, and that was it, okay, that was it, and so I believe what the church does is at the time they were somehow creating, I don't know how this was orchestrated really, all the steps exactly, but this is how I kind of like figure it in my mind, okay? In this case, you know, they knew that Stevie Braganza was a part of uh, King Tut's cloning process, which resulted in having James Gordon be born, okay? And then when C.B. Braganza left the earth, then he sprung back up as Maria Gordon. So in this case, you know, James Gordon had arranged for me to be cloned, okay? Um, Now, I'm going to be resented because, number one, the reason why I was bullied and um, the reason why I was targeted is because the people who were conducting the experiment were setting standards for me that I was not even aware of, nor did I even know that they even existed. Okay, and at the same time, my father was completely unaware of uh, what was going on really and giving an explanation as to what was going on with my behavior. For example, you know, they wanted me to behave a certain way, right? And there's no way in the world I would have known that because, you know, we had rules in the house, okay? And they were never communicated to me. Like the ones that were already set were communicated to me, but if these were of any importance, you would think they would have told my father that, right? So that he would have let me know, and then we could have all fallen in line if that was the case, right? But that wasn't the case. So it was basically a lot of rumors circulating, a lot of punishment was taking place, a lot of hate crimes were taking place, a lot of anger, frustration, and bullying was going on, and justification for bullying was basically hidden, covered up, exaggerated to one person, and maybe presented in some other way to convince someone else that what this was okay. It was not okay. Okay, so what ended up happening was is that if I did something, anything, okay, I would get people sitting here looking at me, talking about me, gossiping about me, but never telling me what they hated about me. I had no idea that my family was hating me because I was becoming the person that I was. Because as far as I knew, like my mom always told me, this is something that my mom and my dad always said. Okay, as long as we were operating the guidelines of the law, which I knew what the law was, I was A-okay. And I understood that. So really, I was being hated on all these years for issues relating to religion. Okay, but mainly because of my race. Okay, but mainly because I was looked upon as a rival of the royal family, which I find ridiculous, mainly because it never even occurred to me to do that. If I would have, I don't think I would have ever woken up, like found out that I was Prince Alame, who had this issue, never happened. You know what I mean? The Murray family farms. I would have probably just been like blind and being irritated by their constant, harassment of whatever group was following me around, whether that be the two people that I just recently addressed or whatever. But, whatever. That's not really important. But the point is, it's like, people held things against me and hated me for many years for things that I had rights to do. Now, I know that originally I was CB Braganza. I was a man, okay? And CB Braganza was being punished because this particular group must have been very conservative. There must be traditionalist, okay? And they were probably very racist, right? Trying to strip me down of who I am to exert their forceful power over me. That was abusive, okay? And a total disregard for who I was as a person, which is in line with the whole idea of this whole Cabbage Patch thing, okay? So you get outs by your family, which was automatically crazy, because the reason why your family is taking you in is because of some sort of weird order or agreement that you're supposed to be cloned so that eventually you can become a Christian, right? You can become a Christian because you weren't a Christian in your past life or whatever. So this is the reason why you were brought back, okay? Now, none of my family members were Christian except for my sister Tanya, and she was the one who had the most mental problems, okay? There is no sympathy for the target. There is none. Okay, the reason why is it makes it easy for them to not have sympathy for you. You know why? Because they think you're an agent of the devil. That's why. Okay, now I would think, I'm just like, it makes it almost impossible for you to have any bonds or connections with that sort of propaganda going on. Okay, it makes you the enemy. Period. Okay, this isn't some rumor where you slept with somebody's husband where somebody could eventually forgive this. This sort of rumor campaign was meant to have me destroyed and not live. Okay, because I tell you what, I wouldn't want any fucking agent of Satan coming into my house, right? So how do you hurt somebody? That's a very, very dark rumor. Okay, so there is no sympathy for the target. This makes the and the reason why they have no sympathy for the target is because in some situations they use things like emotional blackmail. Okay, like like you might be a teenage girl and they may not like the fact that you're listening to a Walkman as you're walking down the street, right? So they might punish another family member so that every time you do something that they make it difficult for that person. This might be one of their tactics, okay? So that person's naturally going to resent you. But since they can't tell you why they're resenting you, it's just a circular thing that just seems kind of crazy, kind of odd, kind of twisted. Okay, so now we have all these negative words that I continue to use when it comes to the association to this entire plan. There is no happiness involved in it. There's nothing positive, okay? So let's keep that in mind as I move on to the next slide. Okay, now I think it's important for me to mention the abuse and the pleasure that the people get when you are suffering. And they justify it to exalt themselves, to make them feel like, hey, look at us, score one for the Christians, right? And this is a very sick, pathological behavior that gets displayed by these people. I have seen the looks on these people's faces, and I'm going to tell you that it's purely demonic. Okay, this is the stuff that I would deal with when I would go into job interviews. This is the sort of stuff that I would deal with in the workplace. Now, there's a lot of things that can be said about the dangers of this sort of competitive spirit, okay? But when you add religion into the mix, okay, this is where it gets very twisted and very, very dark, okay? Now, this particular cult, and I referred to it as a cult before. I referred to it as a cult when I first started my YouTube channel in 2015. And the reason why is because it was not clearly defined. There are several different denominations that were involved in targeting me, okay? We all know that within the Christian denomination, there are several variations of that religion. Okay, I talked about Mormons, Protestants, Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans, so on down the line. Okay, there's a bunch of these people, and they were all acting as if they were one. They were united, all in hating Maria, all in this attempt to kill Maria. And I could name names. I'm not going to do that. Okay, but my point is, I want you to understand the mindset, these sort of covert nature operations. Now, once a frenzy is worked up in these mind-controlled cults, okay, it's very hard to get their mind straight. I had made a video about the Nazi Association, and which referenced legal laws that related to this country, okay? And I had basically brought out the fact that it was a tactic that was originated by white supremacist groups, which, lo and behold, it really was a white supremacist group that originally targeted me, okay? Their religion is basically a death cult. Some of you guys might remember how the Ku Klux Klan used to operate, right? Ku Klux Klan used to operate by, setting up a cross in front of your yard and, setting it ablaze, right? They also lynched a lot of black people, okay? And, of course, they did a lot of covert type operations, as did the Nazis, right? Nazis would do things like spying on people, blah, 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 all of that stuff, okay? All that covert stuff that's meant to drive you crazy, that's meant to make you implode in on yourself, okay? And, the funny part is that as a child, I always had an interest in this stuff. I'm not going to go into my interest in the Nazis when I was a kid. I'm not going to talk about my interest in the Holocaust and my interest of studying religion since I was a kid, okay? All of that is an offshoot of me being C.B. Braganza, okay? Which we can see this now, okay? But the point of this particular group was to kill me, have me dead, period, okay? And then also to silence me. So once they start silencing you, this is where it gets very serious, okay? It gets very serious. So I understood the nature of this program, and I identified it for what it was, okay? It's very serious, and it's a big issue. I didn't realize it was this big, okay? That I was going to say about the purpose of it, okay, is to force you into worshiping their God. Okay, now I'm going to go into their God a little bit later in the next few slides, okay? Now, as I mentioned, we do have free will, meaning, well, when I talk about free will, okay, when it comes to the Bible, okay, the decision to serve this particular God that they claim to be referring to is like you're coming into the serving this deity by free will, okay, because that's the only way it really matters, okay? That's like you saying, just giving somebody something or giving something to somebody out of love. There's a total difference there. Okay, so um, so religion being enforced, okay, is very scary, and this is one of the reasons why I always believed in the Constitution, or should I say the Declaration of Independence, and the idea of protecting those rights. Okay, it can get very dangerous, and this is a great example of what happened. Okay, and I needed to get down to the bottom of things, and this is one of the reasons why my brain allows me to go so far to question the reset. What is this all about? Is religion that big of a deal? Okay, I come to find out it's the fact that there was a lot of people wanting to force me into a relationship, and mainly before financial reasons, and then there was a sort of talk about my religion, and in order for me to convert to do these sort of things, and to be in a setup that I wouldn't want anyway. And it was tearing me up inside, and they knew it was tearing me up inside, and these people it made them extremely like pleasure. Now, I want you to think about all the negative words that I have been using throughout these last few slides, okay? Abuse, um, wicked, people being, getting extreme pleasure off of the suffering of other people, okay? Somebody who wants you to come back to earth, and we know what earthly life is. It's a lot of grind, it's a lot of turmoil, it's a lot of toiling. I forgot the name of that deity, but they show him like rolling a big a boulder uphill only for it to come right back down again. It's a place of continuous suffering over and over again. This is what the earthly plane is. So let's keep going. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, now when it comes to the Cabbage Patch Kids, I don't know a whole lot about the Cabbage Patch Kids as far as like, the whole storyline behind it. I do know that they had a record. I think they also had like a little book, and I do believe that the Cabbage Patch Kids were forced to mine for gold and treasure. So when I look at that and I try to make a comparison to like how a clone would live their life, they are kind of the same way. Meaning like, I guess part of C.B. Briganda's frustration was his knowing that he was able to produce, right, great works, okay, and possibly make money, but he was never allowed to do that. Okay, so he was basically forced to mine for gold and treasure, but perhaps never really received the treasure. You see what I'm saying? Now I want to go back to what I think is the heart of the matter, okay? And when it comes to issues relating to religion, I try to be very careful, and I don't like to sugarcoat things, but I also understand how things can be very sensitive, okay? And when it comes to this particular group that was trying to harm me, I don't believe that their motives were pure, and I felt very disturbed by it because it put my life in jeopardy and it set me back many years of my life. I understand what brainwashing is, okay? And I do understand that, in this life there's like the light and there's the dark, okay? There's the light and there's the dark. And I know the difference between that. And I understand what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And I will tell you that this energy, when it comes to the situation and everything about it, to me, it seems very dark. Okay? Everything about it seems abusive. Because you're dealing with literal abuse, okay, and somebody who's being isolated and treated like they're the other, and given a title or some sort of rumor that gets circulated about them. It is a negative energy, okay, that I had no control over, and nor does any other what do you call it, chosen one or targeted individual, okay. So that in itself is abusive, okay. Also the fact that when it comes to religion, um, forcing someone into a belief system is basically Okay, it's not basically, it is, okay? It's a war on your soul. You know, I used to talk about, the war on souls or battles or whatever. It becomes a religious battle, especially when the magnitude of how big this was, okay? And I think it was wrong. Now, this whole cloning process has been going on for a long time, longer before than I even had the ability to even have an opinion on it. Okay, now um, I do think that I want to talk a little bit more about the energies surrounding this, and I mentioned abusive, devil type energy, Rumpelstiltskin type negotiations, such as it's always about breaking somebody's will. Okay, it's always about hurting a person, making somebody suffer. Okay, it's always about that. You hear people making videos all the time about their job and how they hate it. You hear about, like in my case, where I was set up in these jobs where I was supposed to give up and change myself for something that I didn't even think it was worth it. Much like the Rumpelstiltskin negotiations, that's what I call it. Why? Because, like in the story of Rumpelstiltskin, it's about a girl who needs help and desperately, and so she, is offered help by an imp, okay, which is a demon, okay. She's offered help by an imp to weave all this gold into whatever the straw into gold in a certain amount of time or whatever. So she makes a deal, basically, hey, I'm going to go ahead and make a deal with you, and the deal is that she can get this done, but it's going to cost her her firstborn. Now, that to me is absolutely absurd, oppressive, okay? The choices of, well, you could get a job, but you have to basically hate yourself, hate your life, hate everything about yourself. You might as well kill yourself, right? Because that was the message that I got. And when I came to understand that I was C.V. Berganza, that's exactly how I took it. How else am I supposed to, right? So all of this issues, everything that I've talked about so far, I'm talking about dark energies. I'm talking about the demonic, is what I'm talking about. Okay, and so a lot of people think that they have been brainwashed into this. Now, I just talked about this whole issue of a reset. Okay, in order to create a reset, you had to what? Deceive people. You had to deceive people in large numbers in order to play that off. Why do we have to have numbers skewed? Why does that have to be taught in large numbers and make everybody convince everybody of it? Why? Okay. Question. That's a very good question. If this is holy, why do I have to lie at all? Think about it. Okay. Now, I am not saying that the King George V or Queen Elizabeth was necessarily evil in this situation, but I do understand that a lot of people have an interest in things like the dark arts, and some people have an interest in things like entities. I mean, conjuring up entities or whatever. Now, I don't understand exactly like what specific entity was involved in the formulation of, I believe, this system. Like this system, I believe, was formulated. I'm going to make a hypothesis really quick. And you know what? While I'm doing that, I'm going to go and change slides so I can at least show you a picture of what I'm talking about. Okay, so I wanted to kind of shift this around a little bit because I'm talking about all these negative things that are associated with this cloning issue, the targeting issue. So I use words like suffering, bullying, religious fanaticism, the issue of raising children, but you're putting them in a household where there's a lot of conflict, misery, a lot of gossip, which is usually negative. There's mind control, which is the equivalent of deception, right? We have things like people being crazy, okay, odd, twisted, and the need and to bully a person to break the will or that person's spirit. So I also was thinking, everything in life can be compared like on the micro and the macro level, right? Like, there's an old legend in the black community about Robert Johnson. Now, Robert Johnson
they talk about the 27 Club. You know, like most, singers, they say there's like some sort of mysterious thing about being 27, although there's a bunch of other singers who live way past the age of 27. But 27 is, kind of, thought of as this age where some people get sucked into the tunnel of death, okay? Like people like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison. These people died at the age of 27. Well, Robert Johnson was a rhythm and blues singer back in the day, long, long, long time ago, before any of these other people. Okay, so the legend has it, and there's deviations to this legend, but I'm going to sum it up really quick. Okay, so Robert Johnson was what they would consider a somewhat mediocre guitar player. Okay, but his whole dream, I suppose, was like to be like somebody who was extremely talented, a large crowd drawer. He wanted to be a celebrity and well known and recognized. Now, what I find interesting about Robert Johnson is that his father was a sharecropper, which it's noted that his father was actually his stepfather. Okay, perhaps Robert Johnson was a clone, but the point of this story is that Robert Johnson was somebody who dabbled into magic, just like me. I'm a magician. He was a magician. Okay, but what happened was Robert Johnson decided to dabble into dark magic. So the legend has it is that he went to the crossroads, right? And he made some sort of deal with a deity, okay, or I'm going to call it, a deity, a god, or some sort of representation. Maybe could have been an imp, demon, whatever, okay? And I'm going to do a series on the different kinds of invisible spirits. But he made some sort of pact with this demon so that he could gain fame and notoriety and all this other stuff, right? So he had marital problems, so I guess he started developing. The deal was that he was supposed to develop some sort of extraordinary magical musical skills. So like within 6 months period of time, he was blowing people away. Now, of course, his life ended very tragically because, I guess the devil came for its due, right? The point that I'm trying to make is that in magic, there are things called trickster gods. And trickster gods always want to have some sort of payment. And they like to make deals that are always going to end up with some sort of negative consequence, okay? There's a light and a dark side of everything. And so I guess the moral of the story for a lot of black people who've heard this story about Robert Johnson, okay, is that, to reach for fame and fortune in a greedy manner, okay, is always going to lead you to something negative, because he was a trickster god. When we pray for positive things, there's not supposed to be some sort of negative reaction, you know what I mean, or some sort of sacrifice. It's all a positive, equal flow. It's like it's a blessing, and you get upgraded to another blessing. There is no dropping one thing to get another, okay? But it is when you're dealing with trickster gods, okay? So Robert Johnson may have got to have maybe a few years, very, very few time, a little time, in the spotlight. But then the bad part is that the devil wanted to collect on his due, right? They made a deal. That was the deal, okay? According to the legend, okay? So that's on a micro level, because he was dealing with a deity that was rather small. Like, I think some people said there's been reports of Robert Johnson petitioning people like Papa Legba. There's been people saying that he petitioned Beelzebub. There's people that say that he's petitioned Lucifer. The story continually gets changed around, okay? But the point is that he made a deal with some sort of what people would believe to be a lower level entity, okay? Which I will tell you, on the earthly plane, there's a lot of lower level entities, okay? And lower level entities are more likely to respond quickly, okay, without very little barriers, right? Because they're desperate to deceive people. This is one of the reasons why I was talking about Ouija boards. There's certain things that you can bring into your house that have this sort of energy to it. That's why I don't mess with Ouija boards. When I was younger, okay, and I consider myself a spiritual person, but it is completely normal. It's a normal response. If you start understanding that you have like certain magical abilities, you're going to start experimenting, okay?
Now, I experimented with the Ouija board when I was younger, and I understood that's the kind of stuff I don't want in my house. Why? Because the Ouija board can actually create physical manifestations. I don't like physical manifestations. That means that, you know, I can actually see entities. I could, you know, it can affect like a stronger type dark energy, like a poltergeist, okay? I don't like that stuff in my house, okay? So that is, but it's something that people dabble into, okay? And I would think that this issue that relates to King George V and Victoria and all these other people, right? Because in England, I'm going to tell you what, their fascination with magic was big, okay? And I do believe, you know, based on my intuitive messages, and just the fact that, you know, Prince Alamehu had such magical origins, okay, coming from Egypt. And I know that there's a lot of people who even call themselves, like that guy who was doing the excavation, he was an Egyptologist. Okay, this is something that people got into. It was like a profession, that he wasn't the only person who had that title. Okay, so there is an interest in magic. Okay, now, I believe that out of their need, their desire to want to have recognition and to have power, okay, that they summoned and worked alongside with an alien race that was, and I'm going to tell you, aliens, angels, demons, they're all the same, okay? They are not of this, what do you call it? They're not of this dimension, okay? So anything that goes outside of this dimension that we can't see, or, you know, or can visit us from time to time and cross those borders, okay, could be considered something of the angelic realm. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are some people in certain countries that use the word demon to describe a good entity or a bad entity. Okay, so and so I like to use the word angelic. Okay, but you know, if you start looking up this information, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be prompted to do this, right? Because this is an interesting topic. Aliens, okay? Aliens is a word that I think is more appropriate in this situation, okay? But when I say aliens, I'm also referring to the angelic, okay? So I believe that certain aliens, or possibly out of the curiosity of dabbling in magic and wanting to be very powerful, perhaps made some sort of agreement with this particular, and there, I do believe there was more entities that were involved in this, okay? Now, for one, when I think of certain entities, I think of the demiurge, okay? Now, the demiurge is believed to have been the originator of evil, okay? And when I think of, I would think of like, okay, the demiurge would be on the same sort of level as like Satan, okay? Or, you know, the demons, okay? Because the Bible says that the demons, while they were in heaven, were not thrown down in hell. That's not what the Bible says, okay? The Bible said that the demons were thrown down here on earth. Okay, so there's like these like weird, wicked entities running around. Some people, I believe, Gnosticism, like when the Gnostics, are the people who came up with the idea of the demiurge. Okay, that's maybe their explanation for who Satan is. Okay, whatever the case is. Okay, they come in different forms, and it's usually dark. And when it comes to trickster gods, they are the ultimate trickster gods. Papa Legba's got nothing on the demiurge. Okay. If you sit here and work with these sort of like demonic forces, okay, there's going to be negative consequences to such things, okay? Seriously, there will be negative consequences to such things. So this is one of the reasons why throughout this entire program, you're seeing kids who are dealing with trauma. This is one of the reasons why you see kids who are dealing with mental issues, bullying, extreme bullying, mind control, deception. All of these things are a part of what the demiurge is associated with. Now, when it comes to gnosis, you know, there's a distinction between the highest God or the supreme being and the demiurge. It's like, it's kind of like the mirror reflection or the oxymoron or the black and white version of like, here's two gods. Here's like the supreme being who is light, okay, and then we have the demiurge that is dark. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's reverse of what is actually light, okay. And a lot of people, such as Robert Johnson and perhaps King George, and Queen Victoria, out of curiosity and the need for recognition. Okay, this is one thing that is a spiritual lesson, to never get greedy for those sort of things. Okay, because people get involved in things that they wish they really wouldn't want to get involved in. Okay, now, what else I want to say is, okay, so in a lot of systems of gnosis, okay, it's not just that the demiurge is like the reverse or the backwards form of the supreme being. It's like they depict him as like foolish and making like big mistakes, something that is like incompetent. Okay, and I've noticed like throughout this program, the reason why I was able to figure out this program is because it seems like it's almost like you can see right through it. It's like it's predictable. It doesn't have any, okay, how can I say this? Shoot. I can't really give you an example what I'm talking about, but I don't know. Maybe I'll come up with another example some other time. I can't think of one at the moment. But to me, it's like, there's certain things that would occur, and it's like, it's so obvious that, okay, like what was going on over at my last job, like, to me, it was obvious that something was going on, that they had something against me, okay? And sometimes they would slip up and say things where they shouldn't do that, right? And the very fact that they would do that, it's like the demiurge can actually take over the spirit and the personality of someone else, okay? Like, I was talking to you guys about the weird faces and the strange, the sick, twisted faces and the looks on their faces. Like, okay, like my last boss, right? Now, she would be, she looked like she was really nice, okay, but inside of her, she was very sick and very twisted and very dark. And there were times where her face looked very wicked, okay, different from her soft and her, laid back look, okay. And one thing that can make the demiurge activated is somebody who has some sort of severe envy and hatred towards you, okay. That is one thing. If you don't get your envy and your hatred under control, that is something that could like call up the demiurge. I am not kidding, okay? So this right here, because it was so widespread, it was just very intense, okay? This is one of the reasons why I felt it so long. This is one of the reasons why it affected me, and this is one of the reasons why when you think about this whole cloning issue, this is the reason why there's so much trauma. There's so much shame, so much pain, so much heartache, so much tragedy that goes on in this, because it is not of the light. Okay, also I wanted to say about the demiurge, okay, which I think is very, very important. They are one, okay, of the dark forces here. That's purpose, okay? Its spiritual purpose is to keep the spirit and soul earthbound. Did you hear what I said? It's here to keep the spirit and the soul earthbound. Okay, that's one of the reasons why I do not like the idea of cloning, because I do not want to come back to the earth. I want to go to heaven. Now let me talk to you about another spiritual entity. Now in Gnosis, archons are believed to be the builders of the physical universe. Okay, and what's so sinister about them is that they prevent souls from leaving the material realm. So here we have another dark entity, right? Or entity or representation of these builders of the universe, which I believe like it's a part of the earth system that we live on, okay? Now, when it comes to things like understanding spiritual things, we read things like the Bible and other holy books, and you can actually delve deeper into certain topics. Like, for example, when I was younger, I was always interested in this whole dualistic thing about, the God and the forces of, the devil and all this other stuff, right? So I remember I did have a book on what they call demonology. This is what gives you an idea of the different, yes, there are different levels of demons, just like there's different levels of angels, okay? Now, I know a little bit about that. The reason why I am not an expert on dark entities is because I've read about it, but I've never like sat here and worked with it deeply and got that involved in it. I wanted to be informed. That's all I wanted to do, okay? But some people actually petition these dark forces, okay? And that doesn't make a person who petitions them evil, okay? It doesn't. It makes them curious, it makes them desperate, and it makes them unwise. Now, there are some people, I would say, that are just outright evil and who do align themselves with these forces, okay? But I think a lot of people, they want power, they want some sort of purpose and and meaning to the existence of this life. So sometimes people feel as though that might be their last resort and they'll do it, okay? So I believe that we were working with dark forces, and everything about this whole situation of the clone system to me is dark, meaning like all these clones and their life that they have to live, the pain that they go through, the idea of being a scapegoat on purpose. And really it's meant to keep you in a subservient position and be a target of hatred. That's it. Okay. And so that was the original plan, because okay, think about that in high school. Okay, when you're in high school, or maybe at an age where you really didn't know very much of whether or not it was wrong to bully a person. Now, personally, I think people should know this when they're kids, okay? But some people just bully, and some people think that bullying actually is a form of them showing and demonstrating their power. Okay, this is erroneous, but this is the mistake a lot of people make, okay? So in this case, it's like, well, some people they want you to know that they're the best, okay? So they will create fights and issues and whatever because it makes them feel superior to do so. Just like, when that guy I used to know from high school, or not high school, elementary school, was calling, telling me about his job, knowing good and well I wasn't working, knowing good and well he was part of a network that was keeping me from working, these sort of things, but it made him feel really good about himself. Okay, the petty things that people do that, and they do these sort of things, okay? So in this case, it's kind of like that, okay? And let's just say, for example, these people, these ancestors of the royal family, were just whatever. And you deal with the archon energy, you deal with the demiurge energy, and boom, this is the sort of thing that happens. Now let me explain something about these messages that I've got. I did write them down, and I'm doing a lot of meditating on this whole issue of my origins and my purpose of being here, and just what everything means. Now, I just want to say something really quick. Now, remember when I started making these videos in 2015, I was saying that I'm the kind of person, if I think about something, I'm going to drill it down. That's why I try not to intersect with other people, because people cause drama, and then I'm going to want to find out what the hell is the drama about. And now I've basically drilled it down to the entire point of the mankind's existence and creation. This is how fucking obsessive I can get. So let's go get into my intuitive messages. Okay, so I got the message that dark forces on Earth supplies information and ability for light on purpose. Wait, dark forces on Earth. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I covered that. Sorry, like I said, I write so sloppy, I sometimes can't even read my writing. But it was basically saying that dark forces on Earth, they suppress, okay, information and the ability for us to see a lot of times on purpose, okay? So when I think about the extreme mind control that was involved in this, like people not knowing that they were clones. People like not even thinking but bullying them and hurting them, and not even really knowing much about their religion, but they're doing all these sort of things. They're not acting like the Jesus that people talk about, but they're doing something else, and they're doing it in such an evil, sick way. Okay, this is dark, very dark. Okay, I got the intuitive message too that Christianity is no longer using forceful tactics. Okay. I hope that, I believe that my messages have been helping when it comes to how to demonstrate, how to act and accordingly, okay? Because I did call out the hypocrisy in this, okay? And I couldn't help but do it. Okay, so another message that I have is, this is what I wrote in last night, but I'm just making this part of the video today. I'm making this video in sections, okay? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm really getting burnt out on this subject, okay? But right now, I'm in a period of transition because, I just dealt with so much, and I really don't know exactly what's going on with my life right now, and I'm just burnt out on the whole thing, okay? So there's times where I have to sit here and pause because I'm like, oh my God, I can't go anymore. I'm just tapped out. Like, I'm tapped out because it's just, I become very burnt out on my life as Maria Borden. Okay, I'm very burnt out on it. It's like I'm tired of dealing with betrayals. I'm tired of dealing with just sick people, bullying. I'm tired of it. So it's just like, I'm done. I'm done. So I just feel like there's really not anything really for me to focus on in this life. So now I'm looking into my past life trying to get answers on stuff. Okay, so the message that I got last night was that the Demiurge and the Archons, that this okay, so yeah, okay. I wrote this down. Okay, the Demiurge and the Archons is my theory, okay? And I see the tie-in that there was a deception. The deception was, a lot of people don't realize they're messing with dark forces. They really don't understand, like, that they're messing with dark forces. But oftentimes when people have this lust for power, those are the sort of deities, those are the first deities that they call on. Are these sort of like deities that you see in like dark magic books or whatever, this kind of stuff. And there's usually something very negative, and this is the effect of it. We have people who've gone into mental insane asylums. We've had families broken up. We've had people who are homeless. We've had people who committed suicide, all because of this. Okay. Now, I had mentioned before, it was in one of my videos, I think it was maybe about a month ago, the message that I got was the aliens who assisted with the cloning were specialists in what they do. Okay, I'm going to say when it comes to the ability to design and being able to create a vessel, okay, a workable vessel, I would say yes. Okay, now do I think that these aliens are twisted and a little strange? Yes, I will say that. Okay, now, not through. Okay, so I was basically saying that success, however, is not through these aliens' life. Okay, they did not give good instructions on how to guide mankind. That was my message, okay? So anyway, the other message that I got today, this morning, was the angels / aliens that assisted with the cloning are the Demiurge. Okay, so I had mentioned this a few days ago about my suspicions about the Demiurge. And everything that relates to this whole issue shows it. The mind control, the bullying, the hate behind it, the just the sad waste of life. When I think of how I suffered, how my family suffered, and a lot of other families have suffered. I mean, if I think about the black sheep in other families too. I'm sure a lot of those little kids on the orphan train wanted to have happy lives or the best possible life they possibly could, but they probably were put in situations where they were just nothing but abused. You know what I mean? The other, and then they would try to go around other family members, and they would always be like, ostracized and gossiped about, and people mistreating them and blah 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 blah. These kids were set up basically just to be messed with. This is very sad. Okay, and it was wrong. Okay, so what else did I want to talk about? Okay. Now let me go on to the next slide because I wanted to talk about something that I thought was pretty important because I got some more downloads about life as C.B. Berganza and life of James Calvin Gordon. Okay, so in the previous slides, I was referring to a book that was written in the 1800s, okay? And the name of the book was called 10 Days in a Madhouse, okay? Which was a good book because it did help create changes in the New York Insane Asylum, okay? Because there was been talk about what was going on there. And of course, just like any institution, like the old folks home or any place where people are vulnerable, people got abused in those insane asylums, right? So in the book, she talks about pretending to be ill so that she could be a patient there. And of course, she used that opportunity to get to know some of the other patients. And what she had noticed is that a lot of people were in there for reasons that seemed frivolous and silly and pointless. Okay, but when I look at it and I start analyzing it, it seems a little bit more sinister than that. Okay, because some of this seems like it was meant to modify people's behavior beyond their control. Now, some of the offenses back in the day that would get women locked up in an insane asylum is, number one, she had met somebody in there who was not able to answer the questions because she didn't speak English. Okay, so people would get frustrated, they'd lose their temper, and the next thing you know, if they didn't have any family or anything like that, she gets thrown in the institution. Another thing that would get you thrown into a mental institution. Now, I thought this was funny at first, okay, but when I really thought about it, it seemed very sinister, okay? If you were a woman back then in the 1800s, okay, and you were reading things consistently like romance novels, that would get you thrown into a mental institution. Now, when I think about this deeper, I keep thinking, okay, the reason why I think that would get you thrown into an institution is because obviously most marriages at that time were built on what? The institution, right? Like, a man has a woman, but doesn't necessarily have to cater to her emotional needs. Now, one thing with romance, and see, I don't read romance novels. I've never been a fan of them, okay? But I'm relating to why women would involve themselves, indulge themselves in this sort of reading material at that time, okay? Number one, it's a form of escapism, and they probably expressed a certain kind of desire that this is what they wanted for themselves. They wanted somebody to love them back, okay, right? So if people were to read this, if women were to read this, then of course they would want these expectations. They would want to have more in their relationships. So in order to modify their behavior and to make sure that these women were in check, in line with the program, your ass is going to the insane asylum. I thought this is some crazy shit, right? But this is an interesting book that I read many years ago that was written in the 1800s. Now, I was called to read this book when I was Maria Gordon, okay? But now, today, I did some reading. Got some more intuitive downloads. I'm reading these in sections, okay? And I came to find out that in my meditation, I found out or believed that C.B. Berganza died in a mental institution. Okay. Now, he died, according to what I understand, he died in 1956. And I believe that his family, my father, and perhaps his daughter Louise, put him in there at the instruction and the, what do you call it, social pressure from outsiders to put me in the mental institution for me liking clothes. I'm going to repeat this again. For me liking clothes. Okay, now I'm going to tell you right now, there are certain things you cannot separate a person from unless because it's so much embedded into who they are. Now, I am not gay, okay, but I know that there's a lot of people, a lot of parents, okay, do everything they possibly can to take the gay out of their kids. They will put them in re-education camps. They will punish them. They will do all kinds of stuff, okay, to re-modify or readjust their behavior. But at the end of the day, this kid's going to be the way they are, okay? Same with me. This is a part of who I am, okay? But this was a part of the bullying tactic of the original plan of what King George V wanted, as well as Queen Victoria wanted, to bring up people to bully, okay? And why, that's very, what do you call it? It's oppressive. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand, these people have titles, but when you think about why they wanted to do something like that, that is extremely inhumane. Okay, extremely inhumane. Okay, so I'm thinking about what was going on in the insane asylums. I'm thinking about the things that I was drawn into reading. It's my kind of reading material that I used to watch and read and make a point to find an interest in it when I was younger. I just naturally gravitated to certain things because these were certain hints and clues about my life. Like when I was younger, there was this demolished insane asylum that was around my it wasn't really, it was actually in the town, like further down from mine, but it was still a part of the Antelope Valley, okay? I used to like visiting it. Why? Because I wanted to feel the residual energies. I felt sympathetic to people who were in these sort of institutions, you know what I mean? And I've always liked dealing with I'm a creepy person because I'm a mystical person, okay? But I think it's important to know that, yeah, I ended up in a mental institution in 1956, but I was totally sane. I was just somebody who was very strong-willed, and after year after year after year after year, people, trying to hurt me, badger me, bully me, and I'm like, wait, this is my right. What are you doing? This is the only thing I have to live for. Because at the end of the day, that is the only thing I have to live for. I don't want people to think about what they've done to my life in this life, and basically, this is all I have to live for. I only have to live for myself. No one ever gave a shit about me. Okay, and I must have felt the same way as C.B. Braganza, and I was a fighter all the way into the mental institution, and I was totally sane, as I am today as Maria Gordon. Now, I'm not exactly sure how the process works of like when you want to clone somebody, or because I believe that when this is going to get okay when I believe C.B. Braganza was approached and made aware that they wanted to clone King Tut. Okay, so it's not something that he was like begging for them to do. I don't believe that. Okay, this was a part of the whole Christian program. Okay, but anyway, I did get a message about that I thought it was really important, and I wanted to say about the cloning process and how a lot of kids end up being abused and blamed for no reason. So, now that I understand what happened to C.B. Braganza in 1956, through social pressure, which, I know that they put a lot of pressure on family members because this whole issue, the setup, is never like, a direct conversation to end it right then and there. It's always the game playing, the gaslighting. So C.B. Braganza's bewildered. He doesn't know why his family's turning on them. And it's really simple. Okay, now, I know, looking at old pictures of my dad when I was growing up, I would say my dad was a pretty sharp dresser, okay, until he started working for NASA. Then he just started wearing regular brown pants and a dress shirt, okay? But I remember looking at his sweaters, and of course, because I have an eclectic love of mixing and matching clothes, when I was in 8th grade, I would go into his closet from his old and dig out his old clothes, and I would wear them, okay? And I would put my own little spin on it, okay? So my dad was a decent dresser in his young years, okay? But once again, this whole thing comes down to white supremacy and the tearing down of a human being and trying to tear down their character, okay? In my mind, it wasn't about white supremacy or me trying to stand up to white supremacy. It is the fact that, look, this is the only damn thing I care about. This is the only good thing in my life that I have, and I'm going to fight for it. Okay? On a legal standpoint, it was like, I knew my rights. Okay? But I never realized that these sort of orders were coming from something that was drawn up, uh, a long time ago about, who I was and what the bullying setup was. I did mention in a few of the slides um, before, because this video is being made like within a few days. Taking me a while, but I did mention that I was married before, and I do believe perhaps maybe there was a lot of people just like bullying me that could have been related to my first marriage, as well as a lot of other white people who didn't like my attitude or my self-confidence. Okay, but that's basically what it was. Is that I was completely sane, and I do know that when it comes to
people who believe in the occult and people who have an understanding of the occult, a lot of times they do get set up for things being placed into mental institutions, especially when their shit starts making sense. All right, it's like you know too much, okay? But believe me, I don't like to know everything, and I only know enough about Seaweed Briganza because it's for me and my own healing process. But I will say that when it comes to the idea of cloning, because we're talking about things like soul transfer, that to me is the occult right there. Okay, because you're dealing with an unknown force. Like when people die, their soul leaves. Okay, and it's like floating around. There used to be old superstitions in the South, and maybe some other people might relate to this similar. What they call it superstition, but people took this stuff seriously. Like when a person would die at home, well, that's how they used to do it a long time ago. People would shut their mouth. Why? Because they didn't want the spirit, another spirit to come in and what do you call it, inhabit that body. There were people who used to cover the mirrors, right? Because as the soul exited, they were afraid that maybe it would get confused and go and try to go into the mirror. You know what I mean? There were certain things that people did at the time of death, right? Because they took the stuff seriously. And I'm going to tell you, when you're dealing with cloning, it is a spiritual side to it. Because, like I said, people, our spirit doesn't die. It just changes. It just leaves the vessel and floats off somewhere, wherever it wants to. There's total freedom in the heavenly state. Okay. Now, like I said, there's some people like myself. I came back disturbed because I was pissed off. I felt like somebody did me wrong. A lot of times people talk about people who like insane asylums. They talk about the residual energies of insane asylums. I remember experiencing the residual energies when I used to go to places that were like insane asylums, because this is a place where a lot of negative energy collects. Okay, there's a lot of people who might be insane. Some people who are insane may be consumed with demons. There are some people who are literally demonic in those institutions, and then you have people who are just in a state of misery. Okay, and then you got people like me who are bewildered and scared and wondering what the hell, why did everybody turn on me, and the hurt that they felt. Because I'm going to tell you what, I feel as though I was 100% sane. I don't believe I've ever been insane. Okay, I have always been like right on it. Okay, and the reason why I'm an occultist. Okay, and see, this is what why I have a problem with religion. Okay, is because religion tries to remove the spiritual, this is what it's all about in the first place. Okay, if we're talking about a God, we're talking about a God that we usually don't see. It's some sort of creator, right? Okay, but it's like it's always, how can I say this? I'm an Egyptian. Okay, let's put it that way. I'm an Egyptian, and the spiritual realm and I are meant to be connected. This is who we are. I am who I am. Okay, let me go over to my next intuitive message. Okay, so I started getting some thoughts and thinking about, the orphan train. Then I started thinking about, okay, what made them take Prince Alamehu? Why did he get snatched up in the first place? Okay, and apparently, I'm doing these readings, and I started thinking, okay, there's a lot of step parents that are involved in this. Okay, because of course, when you're cloning, it's probably a relative of at least one of the parents, of course, and the other person, they're just raising the kid, right? I started thinking about, okay, timelines. Okay, I don't believe that King Tut died they excavated his grave 300 years after he died. I don't believe that. Okay, I do believe that time hasn't been messed with. Why? Because I do understand that there has been some sort of, I understand the reset. The reset was to shake history, redirect attention, and to change power structures. Okay, so there was a time where we had our own little, we call it dominion or whatever, and those things were taken from us. Okay, and I get that. Okay, I get that. And then
certain things that were attributed to certain races were taken away and then given credit to white people. Like I remember growing up, I used to see pictures, movies where like people like Elizabeth Taylor was portraying people who were like, like Cleopatra. Now I'm not saying Cleopatra wasn't light skinned because she did have Greek ancestry, okay, but she was also African, all right. I also remember seeing movies where people portrayed Egyptians as white in general, okay. So I understand that went on. So, and then also we don't get talked about in history. I understand that white people have always admired the Egyptians. Okay, like I talked about in like one of the other slides about how this profession of like being a professional, what do you call it, Egyptologist? Is that what they call it? The guy who did the excavation of King Tut's grave was not the only person who went through with that had that title. Okay, the whole goal is to try to understand our methods of magic and to duplicate it, and to also have the same sort of power as the Egyptians. So this is what the whole thing was. They loved our mysticism. So you notice, like people like Aleister Crowley, his magical theme is a lot of it's built around Egyptian ideas, right? And there's actually pictures of him wearing hats like pharaoh type hats. Okay, so I get that. I get that. What else did I want to say? So they wanted to take that away from us and become the power structure. Now, when it comes to worldly power, I don't fight for it. I've never said I want to be in good politics. I'm one of these people who I love the mystical more than I love the physical. I am here just to get the job done, meaning I'm here on Earth. This is my last time on the Earth, and I do not want to come back. I do not want to come back. Okay, so yeah, I get the picture of what this whole thing is about. So I was thinking when I was thinking about things like the orphan train, I'm thinking about my dad. I'm thinking about the fact that somebody wanted to go into King Tut's tomb, and locate it into 1922 and blah, 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 right? So that made me think a little bit more about Prince Alemehu, right? But before I go to that, I do want to make one more point about the obsession with Egypt, okay? Now, when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, they're a what do you call it? A Christian denomination that that I believe kind of understands the cloning process even more than they say that they do, even though they themselves have a little bit of the brainwashing going on, because nobody ever really talks about clones, just like everything else, okay? But still, when it comes to the fascination with Egypt, okay, Charles Taze Russell had a huge fascination with Egypt, and they used to call it pyramidology. I think that's how it's called. People used to believe that the pyramids were encoded with secret information that tied into biblical prophecy, and this is something that Charles Taze Russell fully believed in. Okay, and it was a part of the whole Watchtower Tract Society setup all the way up until 1928 when they got rid of it. Okay, but you'll notice if you go to Charles Taze Russell's gravesite, you'll notice that he's got a pyramid sitting right there on top to fashion as his headstone. Okay, dead serious. People were very much into anything that was and anything and everything that was related to Egypt, especially I would say in the late 1800s and to the 1900s. Okay, so, and they still are to this very day. And a lot of times when I do see things that are depicted in Egypt, I see it with white people. Now, I'm still not one of these people who I've never raised hell about it, okay? But I'm just saying this is how it is, okay? So this is the whole reason why this reset is a part of the reset. It's about taking credit for what other people do and then putting the white name and the white label behind it. Okay, so now I want to go back to what was making me think a little deeper than that. What made these people take Prince Alemehu from Ethiopia? Okay, so I kept thinking, something told me, I don't believe that Maria Gordon, me,
this is the first time I've been cloned. I don't believe that. Okay. Now I know when I was doing some readings a while ago, I kept thinking, okay, well, possibly the cloning system has been going on since the 1930s. Okay, that's what I kept thinking. Okay, maybe. You know what I mean? But then I kept thinking, okay, okay, what about all those little babies, those little orphan trained people? And then I kept thinking, okay, why did they take Prince Alamehu? Okay, because Prince Alamehu was only 7 years old. Apparently, I got downloads, and I believe that the cloning process has actually been going on longer than the 1900s. Okay, and I do believe that I said I had 88 lives in my based on that tarot reading, but I don't really know exactly what year these things started. I do believe that there are some inaccuracies when it comes to, and I believe these numbers are falsified to throw people off because of this reset when it comes to Egypt, okay, uh, and the discovery of when he was buried and all this other stuff, okay. Now was King Tut's wife, okay, and I was King Tut's wife. When I first found out that I was King Tut's wife, I kept thinking, okay, that was long, like maybe thousands of years ago, whatever, right? But I am coming to feel and realize that I was King Tut's wife right before I was Prince Alamehu. Okay, I feel this very strongly. Okay, and I do know that I get this download that nobody ever found the tomb to King Tut's wife, and that the body was just kind of like missing. I believe that body was snatched up and used to clone to make Prince Alamehu, along with what do you call it? Some sort of fusion of DNA with the emperor. I do not believe that Empress Ruby was my mother. Okay, this is one of the reasons why she probably just either killed her en route to England because she was no longer needed. She wasn't my mother anyway. You know what I mean? I believe, and I don't know all the details, and hopefully I will find out more information, but I believe that cloning has been going on longer than 1900s. Now, by the time the 1900s came, they were very used to used to making more clones, and they were starting to get it down pat, and they started producing more and more kids. This is why we had what you call the orphan trains. This is what brought about all of this stuff, okay? Because it started gaining momentum, okay? But I do believe that maybe, I really do believe that I was cloned from King Tut's wife, and then I was made into Prince Alamehu, and then I know that they tried to make a lot of people convert to Christianity in Ethiopia, but originally, when me and King Tut were married, okay, we had just restored the original religion, Egyptian religion, because there was another religion that was coming in, taking over, and then we went back to the original structure system, which was like a polytheistic type ritual. Okay, now I do know that I've always had like an attraction to the sun. Like people know me as Maria Gordon. When I was younger, I used to stare at the sun. I used to sun gaze. I still to this day feel like this big power to the sun. One of the lessons that I was giving in my now defunct a Swan Song Manifesto platforms was I was talking about, getting fueling up with sun energy. Now that was a concept that was, I believe, a part of my ancient Egyptian practice. Okay. Okay, so yes, I do believe that the body of Tut's wife was stolen for DNA, and this was done to make Prince Alamehu. So they took Prince Alamehu because I was a clone. That's why. Okay, I believe they took him, and the father committed suicide, and that's why. Okay, so now the was cloned by. Okay, so yeah, the prince was cloned by the British and the alien fusion cooperative type thing. Okay, so I was
cloned straight out of Egypt. Also, cloning resets. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so that was my thing. I believe that the cloning process, and it could have been even earlier than that. They could have been making clones even early in the 1800s, okay? But I believe that I was cloned directly from the corpse of King Tut's wife, and I know I'm not using her name because it's too much of a mess to sit here and try to pronounce, okay? But I believe that, and this is what I feel intensely. And then once I became Prince Alamehu, they wanted me to probably raise my next, my not my, what do you call it? My bring forth, I should say, bring forth, my actually King Tut was not only my husband, but he was my half brother. Okay, so this is how all of this stuff plays out. Also, the Emperor of Ethiopia rejected Christianity and related to. That's why. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, those are the messages that I got about that. Okay, so I want to go on and talk about something else about my father in the next slides. Now, I want to say that, kind of summarize the issues with my dad and me confirming my suspicion that my dad was indeed a clone himself. And it's funny because I remember my dad would tell me that his mom would always say that he was a very strange child. You know what I mean? And I get it. Me and my dad were married in a past life. And we were half brother and sister, and I do believe that me and my brother, my half brother, whatever, and my husband at that time, King Tut, were geniuses. Okay, I mean, when you really think about it, we came. It seems as though we do not need as much time to learn and grasp things as much as everyone else. And this is something that amazes a lot of people. This is when I get these intuitive messages about how King George V would observe me. He was very impressed with me as a person, as C.V. Braganza, so whatever. Okay, now I do remember when I was younger, the name King Tut was circulating in my household, okay, but never, ever, ever one time did anyone ever associate King Tut to my father, okay, but now I'm starting to remember certain things that I saw as a kid. Now, I know back in the 70s, I think that's when I saw that movie, something about the tomb of King Tut, okay? And, there's always been these weird superstitions and ideas about people entering in the tombs of anybody, really, about desecrating tombs and whatever, okay? So, I watched that movie, and I did feel like it was cool. It was one of my creepy, because I'm a creepy person. I think cloning is creepy. I think it is. Okay, it is when I think about it. But whatever. But it's in my blood, I guess you could say. It's some weird joke, I guess. I used to always watch movies that were with my mom, either horror movies or movies with that little creepy feel to it. Okay, and I thought the King Tut movie was a little bit creepy. Not one person in my family ever said, hey, this is who we're related to. Nothing. Okay. But I remember there was always King Tut stuff popping up on the TV. And I remember watching this Saturday Night Live skit with Steve Martin. I think this came out in 1977 or 1978. I have a very, very good memory, okay? And I don't remember all the lyrics to the song, but I just remember him making reference to King Tut. And my family kind of thinking it was sort of funny. But not one time did anybody ever say, oh, that's Dad, or anything like that. So I don't believe, there's nothing that makes me believe or be suspicious that my family was even aware that he was, unless my mom knew and she was never telling us. But the intuitive messages that I get about my father and what was going on in his head, I believe that he knew who he was. Like he had memories, he would remember things vividly from his past life. This is what I'm getting, but I was never able to have a conversation with him about this person. What else did I want to say? Um, oh, hang on. Let me switch slides. Now, I do remember my dad having a subscription to National Geographic, and I do remember getting this particular issue delivered to the house with King Tut. Now, I know that my sister would collect these National Geographics and they would just be stacking up high. But I do remember hearing about Tut. I don't necessarily remember having lessons about King Tut in school. That would be world history. But I don't ever recall hearing about him in school, in the institution. I did read a little bit about, the different Egyptian pharaohs, and this is one of the reasons why I started suspecting that there was some sort of connection with me in Egypt. And so when I first started figuring out exactly what my tie was, I immediately went to King Tut because I knew enough about him. But when I realized that was the correct person that I chose, I did think it was ridiculous because I'm like, oh my gosh, it just seems so, yeah, except it seems cliche, but in fact, that is exactly the way what it was. Okay, so, yeah, I remember hearing about King Tut, watching movies about him, reading about him, and all of that stuff. And, my father, James Calvin Gordon, I would say he was peculiar and a lot like me. Like, I would think what throws people off about me and my father is that we have so many different sides to our personality. Like, we're very hard to pin down. This is because this is a part of our traits. You know what I mean? My father was a very unique person. I remember, he could write with both hands. He was ambidextrous, and that's very strange and very odd for a lot of people because I will tell you, I have a power hand and I have what they call a receiving hand. My receiving hand is weak. I cannot write with my receiving hand. You know what I mean? And I can hardly write well with my power hand, but my father could write beautifully with both. You know what I mean? My father was talented. He could make things out of nothing. And he was very smart. And I would say, even though he was not somebody who had like the 4-year brick and mortar degree, he was just as good, if not better, than the people that he had to be around. And this is one of the reasons. Just like me and my father, at this age, we're similar, okay? Because what I understand now is that I'm going to make a similarity in comparison, okay? Now, back in the 70s when I was little, okay, things weren't so much in our face as they are now, okay? But in some ways they kind of were, okay? I never realized as a child that my family was kind of highlighted and well known. I had no idea. No idea. But I'm starting to understand now that people all around the world knew who my father was. You know what I mean? People were following who we were. And, I remember as a teenager getting this weird feeling that I was a trendsetter of somehow. Okay? And I know that sounds silly, but I would notice that I would take an interest in certain things, and the next thing you know, it would be in stores. Something old and what most people would think is obscure and forgotten about. You know what I mean? Like I would be, okay, for example, I would get interested in, I don't know, old trivets. Okay, and the next thing you know, the fucking trivets are all over in the grocery and all over stores. Okay, or if I take an interest in an old band that people may have forgotten about, next thing you know, this whole band is being like featured everywhere you go, reviving stuff. Okay, so I kept thinking this must all be in my head, like but it's not. Now back then, like now we have the internet, okay, and for all I know, things like they may have known that my dad was getting a what do you call it, had a subscription to National Geographic and decided to send that to my dad. You know what I mean? Just like how they flashed the Prince Alamehu stuff on my news page when I was logging into my email. Things are somehow interconnected, and there's a way that people communicate with you if you pay attention. Okay, and now I'm starting to pick up on you know, the sort of stuff that's been going on around me, and it makes sense, and it wasn't in my head. You know what I mean? It wasn't my head at all. This is exactly what it is. I am a featured person because of my history, because of my cloning history. Okay? And it's making sense to me. And I'm so very grateful that it has, because I needed to have that. I needed to have that. And I had to delve into my intuitive messages, and I had to pull out those cards. Okay? Now, like I said, cards are going to be controversial to some people. I don't have a problem with it. To me, it doesn't open up any portals. I don't deal with any negative consequences, other than maybe getting depressed because you find out certain people might be disappointing you. This is why I highly recommend people who have tarot cards or play with playing cards. Number one, you do not want to know everything about. If I knew everything about everyone, I could not exist on this world. Okay. All I want to know right now is about, I'm done trying to figure out stuff in this life, okay? Because Maria Gordon's bullshit is just too much. I'm so beyond sick of it already. It's like I don't want to know. I want to know more about what was going on in my past life, okay? And obviously, there's a lot of, you know, repeats of what went back then and what's going on now. Now, you know, when it comes to my dad, James Gordon, he was somebody who was highlighted and featured, and I do believe, much like Prince Alamehu information was flashed in front of my face, I believe that the King Tut issue was flashed in front of his face, but unfortunately he may not have been able to catch on. But I do believe that he knew who he was, okay? But what I mean by catch on is he never shared this information with the family, like, hey, you know, I'm Tut or whatever. I do remember us talking and believing within the family, everybody believed that the Egyptians were black. Everybody knew that there was black Moors, and that, you know, we had traveled further than a lot of other people before. A lot of the other, we call it Europeans, we call it travelers did. We knew our black history, not like by heart to where we could like sit here and name and spout off names and locations, not, you know, proficiently. Okay, but we understood that there was some sort of history, you know, that we had some sort of history, okay? And that was not really well known or respected or even liked. Other people liked us talking about it, okay? But I still grew up understanding that I never believed that people of my race were inferior in any way. Now, I do know that in my life I have met some what I would call inferior individuals, because they themselves allowed themselves to be stupid, but I've met that in every race. You know what I mean? But no, I've never believed that. But I've always, unfortunately, had to be around people who wanted me to feel like I was less than. Okay, and so this little game playing that I've recognized has been going on for a few years about somebody trying to beat me into submission, you know, I have to stand up for myself. Okay, now I do remember when I was in grade school, you know, people kind of talking about my dad. This was when my people kind of liked my dad, and then I don't know exactly. Um, People started turning on my dad, and you know, it just got out of control. And I think it got out of control is because, you know, like I said, eventually, you know, he became a hated target because of you know, being a clone. And you get bullied a lot, okay, and they can turn on you at any minute. The sad part about, you know, the whole process of cloning and making people a target. And I'm going to call this a form of ritual abuse, because that's exactly what it is. To me, it's nothing more than ritual abuse, a form of it anyway. It marks a person. It's basically them taking the blame for something that they should have never even had anything to do with. And on top of it, it's like the people who orchestrated it never ever have to deal with the consequences. You know what I mean? They do in a way because it's that the catastrophe is associated with them, but at the same time, it's like, well, you know what? Look at my life. Look how my life was just plowed over. You know what I mean? Now, I want to go back to the demonic aspect of this really quick, because I know how long I've made this video. God, I can't tell you how long I've made it. I know that there's a lot of taunting. This is what makes it so sick. It makes me even brings out the more of the issue of the demiurge and the archons and the sick torment, that goes along with it, and why I associate all of this with the hell realm. Okay, people do know that I do believe, I fully believe, this platform of Earth is hell. And when I think about the demonic energies beyond it, okay, this just for example, okay, we already know there's a lot of suffering, okay, and we know that there's a lot of bullying in this issue, but the mind control and the deception, okay, the deception of being a set up in a fake family, the deception of just believing that this was like a covert nature program, to where like you're not even you're not even you're set up for failure deliberately, only because a certain person or a group of people at one time looked at you as a possible enemy for no other reason. So it's like you're being created just to be played with, for somebody to appease somebody, okay, somebody's ego. And that's like right there tells you something's wrong with it. What else? Okay, and then the issue, I can go on and on about this because it almost sounds too negative to sit here and go on. I wrote a list of everything that makes this place hell. Everything, okay? And then I kept thinking, okay, if I start going into some of it, people are going to get offended. And I'm not trying to do that, okay? The main point of me making this video is to unravel who I am, okay? And that's really important. And I also care about who my father was, okay? Because I will tell you, I love my father very much, okay? And we were soul travelers. We're soul travelers to the end, okay? And perhaps it's because he was the only person who fully understood me. The sad part is there was a lot of friction and tension that went on between me and my father because of this program. Okay, we were both trying to protect each other in both of our lives, and we both felt in some ways that we betrayed each other because of the cloning issue. Okay, I decided to, went along with cloning my father in 1933, and then he turned around, and it's like we are not happy with this Earth setup. Okay, we're not happy with people like literally shredding us apart, tearing up our families, tearing up, that who in the right mind would be happy about that sort of stuff? Okay, all of that the only thing that I can associate that experience with is hell. I can only associate everything I have gone through with hell and the demons that set up this system to create something like that. Okay, this to me was just like, I can't even believe, like, and then the deception of the time change, all of it, okay, is something that has hurt and harmed people, okay, and it's hurt and harmed, I know it's hurt and it's harmed my father. I remember seeing my father cry for the first time, and I could not take it, because all my life, my father was like a very strong man, a very, very strong man. Okay, very well respected. I always had the best and the highest opinion of him. Okay, but these people broke him down, had his brain all shattered. Okay, and it hurt me to see my father like that. But I also did not know how to handle, his breakdown. All I knew is that I was going through my own form of misery. And this is one of the reasons why it breaks down the family structure, because nobody could be relied upon to help each other. Because there's like this time bomb and this, what do you call it, negative energy that's set in place from the very beginning. Okay? You're keeping a secret from somebody. This person's being set up to be bullied. The main people in the family, we call it my mother, is like the ringleader of the bullying. Okay? Which means the kid has absolutely no chance of anything because the mother is ignorant and lets this stuff happen. Okay? And then the kids, the siblings don't care about that because, that makes your suffering makes them the social, what do you call it? It puts them, propels their social life. How about that? Like they benefit from your suffering. Okay, this is how sick and twisted this is. Okay, there is nothing good about this sort of setup. Now, as wicked and evil as I think that this whole thing was, that does not necessarily mean that, cloning is not necessarily a bad thing. I said that there's pros and cons to it. Okay. Like, I don't know. To me, I'm weirded out about it because I'm somebody who would prefer to be procreate the way of what I believe is natural. You know what I mean? But I do understand that this is what happened. That people took. I've been cloned several times in my life, and I find this very odd. The whole thing is odd to me. You know what I mean? But it's interesting to know that the soul can be, what do you call it? Free. It's free. So for choosing to come back into a vessel on an earth that is extremely imperfect. I mean, the reason why I'm frustrated, the reason my father was frustrated, I remember my father telling me he hated people so many times because he had to deal with the same stuff that I had to deal with. Okay, he had cocky people in his face with that same smirk on their face, that same wicked look on their in their eyes, until of course it erupted to the point of where they literally drove my father crazy, and they enjoy doing it. I can't tell you how many people came over to my house and drove by with that look and that sick look on their face. People that knew my father and asking about how my father was, knowing good and well they were killing him. Okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what that was like. It's been very macabre and feeling, knowing that I had to deal with these people. And you know what's even more sick about these people that were in my community? The fact that they normalize that behavior. You know what I mean? So yeah, you talk about people doing strange stuff, or people who were brainwashed, or you talk about the kind of abuse that my father went through. And the thing is that the mocking, that's another thing that I feel is so demonic about this. Okay, my father suffered a lot in his life. Okay, and the thing is that we're dealing with a demon group like archons, demiurge. They feed on this, and it comes out in the people. That's how highly demonic these people are. So my father crying out in pain, or them tearing people down, and all of this sort of stuff, they find it intensely satisfying. Okay, and the reason why they feel it this way is because it's demonic. Period. What else did I want to cover before I'm going to wrap this up? Because I realize how long this is. I was going through some card readings, and I might do some more. I feel as though I know enough right now. Of course, maybe later on I'll think of other questions to ask. But, when it comes to Christianity, I'm not somebody who I resent the fact that this religion issue took up so much of my life. I'm angry that, I'm happy who I am, okay? And I believe that, our backgrounds are important to our spiritual life, okay? And I think most people inherently feel this way as well. This is one of the reasons why, we have these days of the week that are named after European gods, even though Christianity took over. Because deep down inside, this is what they're used to, and this is what they love. Okay, same thing with the holidays. Okay, all of these holidays are pagan. Okay, but the church took them over, so now they're something else. But you know what? All the elements of like the mistletoe and all these, which were European, what do you call it, pagan type religions, that did have a lot to do with magic. Okay, or the occult. This is what people wanted to keep. Okay, so I'm somebody who just comes right out and says it. I'm an occultist. I don't want it watered down. I don't want to have it altered. This is how I choose to be. Okay, and unfortunately, I feel as though I got sucked up into something that I would have rather not have been sucked into. I know the emperor rejected Christianity, and this is one of the reasons what started this whole issue. I'm starting to believe that perhaps maybe Wubi, Empress Wubi, we had some issues. Let me see. Yeah, there was some issues with her because of being a step parent and everything. I will do some more readings on her in the future, just so I can get clarification. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I wanted to share this information, you know, because I feel that, you know, this is an important part of my life. You know, it put me in a situation where, you know, it left me questioning, like, what in the world was going on in my life. Why did this happen? You know what I mean? And I suffered for many years as well as my father did. And, you know, I dealt with what I believe demonic people. And the reason why is, you know, I'm not the only person who's felt this. People who identify as targeted individuals, people who've come from cloning backgrounds, chances are you're a clone, okay? You probably are, okay? Or somebody who, um, you know, just I would say the cloning issue mainly, okay, because it always breaks down to religion and somebody expecting something of you that you cannot be. Okay, I can't be a part of that. Okay, and I'm sorry that it had to be such a big deal, and I'm sorry that I don't know when all this happened. Okay, when King George and all these other people created this whole program, or were collaborating and bullying me because I flipped through sexes. I mean, apparently I started off a woman, then I ended up being Prince Alamehu. Now I'm a woman again. Thing is, we do flip, okay, and I flipped a few times. You know what I mean? I'm comfortable with who I am. So the thing is, they were so demonic. They wanted me to hate myself. And then they were angry because I continued to love myself regardless of the fact that I spoiled their little plan. That I disappointed them because I was not dealing with self-hatred issues because I came out with a woman's body. You know what I mean? So they just had to keep picking and picking and picking. See, this is a part of the torment, okay? So this is one of the reasons why I feel as though, and look how long this has taken me. Like, I never even figured out, I would have never figured out what these people's problem was. Okay, now I understand. And so in my last life, they sent me into the nut house, right? And I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? Why would you do this? Okay, but now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, I understand why they did this. And I understand what mind control is, and I understand that this should have never happened in the fucking first place. You know what I mean? It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I think a lot of people can relate to the suffering and the pain and the depression that you go through finding out that, you know, your whole entire life was just nothing but a setup. That's just too much for a lot of people to handle. But I guess I'm a little bit stronger than most people. Okay, so the last message I have to have is, oh, it looks like I'm out of messages. It looks like that's it. So I'm going to wrap up this video, and I will be back with another video sometime later. I hope you all have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.